instructions have very different effects on different people. So I find it shocking that all these people that give instructions on breathing and teaching you how to breathe correctly always make this assumption that you can just give the same instructions to everybody and it will have the same effect. I mean, what a ludicrous idea. I mean, this is so misguided. So it's like you shoot a gun like a scatter gun, and then sometimes it hits the right place, but it's just completely random. So what we want to do is we want to understand the basic principles. The basic principle is that the breathing, a faulty breathing pattern, if we were to diagnose it, is not some kind of random stupidity by the client, but it is a habit that has grown through the lifetime based on having to cope with woundedness and trauma. So shallow breathing, in simple terms, is a learned way, a habituated way of trying to not feel too much, because if I start feeling stuff, I re-experience trauma and I can't cope with it. I can only maybe cope with it if you help me with it. So that's where the relationship comes in. And that's why the relationship is the container, is the primary thing before we get into the specifics of giving specific instructions. Am I making any sense?
Total sense.
Yeah. I have a question, Michael.
Yes.
Yeah. So what if there is a duplicity of feelings even inside one's body? So I have safe spots inside my body.
Exactly.
But I have unsafe spots in my body.
Exactly.
So I hope that your lecture covers that.
Well, look, I mean, we've only got one session, a few hours, but you see, this is one of the things that gets completely ignored usually. That people make these blanket assumptions and blanket policies, when really the body mind is a really complex system, and it isn't that straightforward. So yes, this is what I mean about the very individual breathing pattern, which is a reflection of a very individual idiosyncratic body-mind experience, which is your biography. And certain areas of your body are flowing and free, and you can access them. And areas of kind of safety or joy or pleasure. There are other areas in your body, and that's very individual. It's not generic to, the next person has completely the opposite. There are areas of your body that are chronically tight or numb. And so we want to, whatever we do with you as a client, we want to base it on a very subtle attunement to your individual being, your individual breathing pattern, and your individual body experience. So, and it's actually human beings have this quite magical capacity to read the other person's body-mind state. We learn this from when we're babies. We learn to read our parents, our mother, our father. We learn to read their state. And so by the time we are teenagers and, adults, we've accumulated so much experience that helps us read somebody else's body-mind experience. You have an intuition. Your right brain does that. It tells you, so you can have ideas about which parts of their body is the other person connected to, and which parts are they not connected to, or which parts are safe and which parts are threatening. Like, for example, let's just make an example. Some people you can see from the outside, without having even spoken to them, that they hold their neck very rigid. Yeah, there are some people where you can see that their neck is like this, yeah? And they go through life with a rigid neck. Now, that gives them a completely different experience of life from somebody whose neck is loose, yeah? Because there is a kind of fear. There is a kind of brittleness structured into, if you have a habit, a posture like this, it's not conscious. Huh? If you ask the person, what's your experience, what's the sensation of your neck? They will often say, well, what are you talking about? It's my neck. This is normal. But from the outside, you can see that the neck is maybe tense and tight and rigid and gives the person a kind of brittleness. And that, like, one of the side effects, or one of the kind of, what goes with that often is that the person is more in their head, because this rigid neck, if you start to explore it, probably has the function of disconnecting the head from the rest of the body. And so you will find that in order, like people who are control freaks, if we meet a client who's a control freak, some of the time, often, there is some kind of manifestation of that in the neck. That would be one example. So if you ask that person to kind of relax the neck, they can't do it. Or so then for a person like that, their neck is not a safe place. Their neck is an unsafe place. And that is immediately connected to the breathing and the throat, makes it much more difficult to, like somebody was saying earlier about their breathing wouldn't go past their throat. So these are the kind of situations that we start with, that the body is this complex matrix where some aspects of, some parts of the body are in flow and the person can connect with them, and those parts of the body feel safe and like a home. And there's other parts of the body that feel more like a war zone and that feel unsafe. Yeah.
I have a question. I can totally relate to Tanze. Whenever I close my eyes while deep breathing, I see people I don't want to see from my past.
Yes, exactly.
I experience them controlling my breathing. The images and concepts keeps me controlling breathing.
Yes.
And what attitude shall I take to get over this pattern myself? I mean, other than the therapy session, or other than any one-on-one session.
Well, if you find that those memories in your body and the memory images that you get when you close your eyes and breathe like that, if you find them overwhelming, then just avoid them. Avoid them like the plague when you're by yourself. Don't try and do your own therapy. If the trauma is overwhelming, why would you want to do your own therapy and take yourself into it? No. Those kinds of experiences of trauma, as you already implied in your question, is maybe better to have somebody else there. So you don't go into those traumatic experiences when you're by yourself, as if you can be your own therapist. You wait until you're with a therapist that you feel safe with, and then you go there together.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael, I have one question. As you said, shallow breathing sometimes is a manifestation of a trauma or some other issue. So can breathing be used in the long term as a therapy itself?
Well, as I said, there's no shortage of people all over the planet who will tell you how to breathe correctly. As I said, the two main problems with it is that the instructions cannot be universal. Whatever instructions or policy or instructions we give ourselves, it needs to start with an acceptance of the breathing pattern that I have, the habit. And then there's immediately a question of compassion. Do I have compassion with my shallow breathing body, my traumatized, shallow breathing body? Or am I just sick and tired of it and fed up with it and frustrated with it? And do I want to knock it over the head with some kind of breathing technique? You can use any technique, including breathing techniques, in a violent way. Yeah? You can use it to attack yourself. You can use it in an uncompassionate way. Any technique. So many breathing techniques that are taught all over the world can fuel a kind of attack on the self. You can use it can fuel an attack on the self. now I'm finding myself breathing shallow again. Oh God, I have to make much more of an effort. So now I have to make an effort. Like, how do I breathe? Okay, I've been told to breathe deeply, so I have to breathe into my belly or whatever the instruction is. And if I do it with that kind of attitude, all I do is fuel an internal war. Yeah? So the breathe.
Can a therapist treat trauma through breathing, different levels or in different sessions?
Well, if you pay attention to the principles I'm trying to spell out, none of these instructions work across the board regardless, all places, all times, with all clients. I don't have any instructions that I can give that I expect to work. Most of the time, as we know from previous teaching, anything that works will tend to take the person deeper, and it will stop working. Because let's say there is shallow breathing, and you and I understand that the shallow breathing is a protection against trauma experience, trauma memory in the body. So one of the metaphors that some of you have heard me talk about before, that is directly related to the idea of breathing being an intensity regulator. That's one of the main things to understand. The way the breathing happens spontaneously, or the way we give instructions for breathing, it has effects on the person's experience of intensity. How intensely do they experience their body? How intensely do they experience their emotion? How intensely do they experience life, other people? So if we understand that breathing affects the intensity of experience, immediately we think about the window of tolerance and how much intensity can the person bear. So if you give instructions for the person to experience life, their body, their breathing more intensely, it will probably provoke the trauma. If the person keeps breathing intensely, they will not immediately, not all people will immediately enter some kind of blissful spiritual state. Many people, when they keep breathing deeply, the first thing they will encounter is repressed trauma that they have been protected against by their shallow breathing. So then the whole question becomes, how safe are you and I together to allow that re-experiencing of the trauma? Now, we can use breathing for that, but you see, at the beginning, maybe breathing is fine, but if you keep breathing, and as the trauma emerges, it stops being fine for the client. Suddenly, the breathing becomes a threatening thing. And suddenly you will find that they don't follow your instructions anymore. The body just shuts down, or they dissociate. And this is one exercise that in the more advanced stages of breath work we can do. You can ask the person to breathe deeply, and then you notice how very soon they do not follow your instructions. Because you let's say you give instructions for them to experience breathing more intensely, to basically charge up. You can, if breathing is an intensity regulator, then one of the things you can do is give instructions that turn up the volume. There's instructions to turn down the volume. Basically, when you turn down the volume, you get the person to breathe out. If you want to turn up the volume of intensity, you get the person to intensify the in-breath. If you breathe like for example, if you breathe like this, in-breath, deep, it will turn up the volume of intensity. If you ask somebody to breathe like that for a little while, the trauma is likely to emerge. They will get into a kind of dizzy state, or they will kind of get into a panicky state, or they will start tingling, have tingling in their body, and many people will get scared of that. So then the question is, how do you then respond to the traumatic experience that's emerging? And yes, I think in principle it's possible. to stick with the breathing. This is what in the 80s, 70s and 80s, we were taught in breath work and also in holotropic breathing. Basically, the person will just say, the therapist will just say, keep breathing. Okay, you've lost your breathing. You've just dissociated a bit. Okay, keep breathing. Go back to breathing deeply. Make the breath connected. And that's all they would say. Keep breathing. Keep breathing. So the metaphor that I've used for this to understand how intensity gets regulated in the body-mind, considering there is trauma and there is protection against too much intensity, and because it brings back the trauma. You can imagine the ocean, the coastline at the, when you walk across the beach, you can find debris that was deposited, let's say, by the last storm when there was a flood. The water went very high. And when it was very high, it deposited debris. So you can see how high the last flood went by the debris that got deposited there, and nothing else ever reached it since then. So trauma is a bit like that. Trauma is an overwhelming experience that's a bit like a flood of intensity, a flood of terror in the body. When a human body experiences trauma like that, it's a bit like a high tide. And it's actually biochemically speaking true that the high tide of trauma, all the sympathetic fight-flight, deposits debris in the body. Because, we know that the charge of terror is experienced partly on a biochemical level through hormones. There's adrenaline. And if the trauma, the terror isn't completed, if the cycle isn't resolved, then it gets dissociated halfway through, let's say. It's a little bit like this debris that gets deposited at the shoreline in a state of hyperarousal. It gets frozen. So that means that the debris is hanging around in your body because you didn't complete the cycle. If you remember Peter Levine, where he describes at the beginning of Waking the Tiger, he writes about this example of the antelope escaping the tiger. Yeah? If the antelope escapes, she gets to some kind of safe place and then she starts shaking. And the shaking is part of processing the hyperarousal. The hyperarousal is like flight, like this. And then at some point later, now it's safe. So when the cycle gets completed and there is a biochemical processing of the hyperarousal, so all that is composted and calmed down, then the antelope returns to some kind of equilibrium. What happens in trauma is that the hyperarousal never gets processed. It never completes itself. So it hangs around in the body and in the mind. And it's like the debris deposited. So when you now, maybe years later, let's say you do deep breathing, you increase the intensity, you turn up the volume, now the flood comes up again, the energy in the body comes up again, and it's a little bit like it now activates the debris that was deposited by the trauma maybe years ago. That's the metaphor that we can use. And of course, to the person experiencing that, the trauma gets reactivated through the deep breathing, through the intensity of the deep breathing, can be really terrifying. So when people do rebirthing, the kind of thing that I did in the 70s, or holotropic breathing, as I was talking about, Stanislav Grof's holotropic breathing, and somebody gets you to keep breathing deeply, 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 it's very likely that the flood goes high and that the flood reactivates debris, trauma symptoms that were buried until now, that have lain dormant on the coastline, but they get reactivated through the intensity of the experience now. Principle to understand. So can we use breathing? Yes, you can use breathing to really easily to re-traumatize somebody. It's very easy. if you get them to keep breathing, you can easily re-traumatize people. There is the habit of the protection that will resist you. But in principle, yes, you can use breathing to intensify somebody's experience. But then it all depends upon what happens with the reactivated trauma in the relationship. So most of the breathing instructions out there in the world are to some degree oblivious of this. They just notice that the person isn't breathing properly or there's shallow breathing. They don't ask why that is. They don't ask about the individual. They just say, this shallow breathing is not good. This is pathological or, flawed. And why isn't this person having a deep breathing the way I do it? And then they give instructions without paying any attention to the possibility of re-traumatizing the person and reactivating the flood in the way that I was just talking about. Am I making any sense?
Yeah.
I have a question, Michael. So we're talking about the breath work that we do with the client, for example, as a therapist, if I were to do with a client. But besides the breath work, besides doing the deep breathing, I'm curious as to how I can, as a therapist, tap into my own breathing patterns to notice my countertransference with the client, and how useful, how I can use it to actually access what the client's body trauma is. For example, I've noticed that with, let's say, a client, my breathing pattern changes.
Yes.
And with the change of my breathing pattern, I've noticed that sometimes the client is going on about something very different, but the underlying feeling is of
exactly
frustration. And I carry that frustration for the client.
Yes, that's
so
right.
They're like, throwing it and projecting it onto me. So I am carrying those traumas and feelings for the client. So I'm curious to know how I can utilize that.
Well, the
my
first
own
thing,
body experiences.
Yes, yeah. So I think the first thing you've already said, somewhere in the back of your mind, you have a kind of ongoing awareness of your breathing. And on the most banal, simple level, at some point, whilst you're relating to the client, probably notice that you're holding your breath or your breath is gone shallow. That's the simple thing.
Yeah.
A good way of thinking about that, I think, is the way you have already talked about it. You want to think about your holding of your breath and what it is that the breath is holding down. Yeah. If there's holding of the breath is holding something at bay, holding something down. And that combination, as most of you know, you can think about that initially. You can think about that as there is some kind of emergency that is being held down by some kind of habitual mode that you've picked up from the client. And so the fundamental question in reflecting on the countertransference is, how is my experience, my conflict between shallow breath and what is it holding down, the emergency it's holding down? You can't see my other hand, actually. I'm going to go back a bit. The fundamental way of reflecting on the countertransference is, how is my conflict paralleling, mirroring the client's conflict? So the first thing is that there is a kind of perception. You notice that your breathing is shallow. So in the countertransference, you recognize that. The next thing is that you think about the countertransference. So there is some kind of reflection thinking part. The first thing is just feeling. Then is you're monitoring your internal vertical, kind of your own awareness of your body, your breathing. Then there's some thinking involved, which is, how is my conflict between holding down and some kind of, let's say, force of frustration that I'm experiencing in myself? How is this somehow matching, or is this parallel to, is this reflecting the client's conflict? So one of the key things, if we do anything with the countertransference, that we can simply summarize as the principle, the client's conflict becomes the therapist's conflict. And the way that is traditionally understood is more on a mental level, but we can easily extend that to the whole body-mind. How is the client's body-mind conflict becoming my body-mind conflict? And the breathing would be one of the main ingredients in noticing that. Yeah. Yeah. What you then do with it, that's complicated. That's the first steps of recognizing, having the perception in yourself and having the perception of the client. That's fairly standard. We all do that automatically. Then thinking about it is something that you have started doing. What to do about it is much more complicated. The last step, the intervention, is complicated because it depends upon recognizing that from the client's unconscious experience, you are part of the traumatizing scenario somehow. Yeah? That's why we call it, somehow, some part of the client's experience, some part of their unconscious, some part of their body is experiencing you as the traumatizing object, possibly. And you want to be aware of that possibility. Yeah? How is that working? If that's the case, how is that working right now? How is that manifesting? Yeah? So you want to be able to think about that before you do anything. Certainly before you do any body-oriented intervention or any kind of breath work instruction, you want to be aware of the relational configuration, and you don't just want to do, as I said, out there in the world, do some blunt breath instruction. You want to be aware of the relationship first before you decide on an intervention.
Okay. I have a question.
Go on.
Can I?
Yeah.
Hello,
Hi.
Michael.
Yes, hi.
Okay. Okay. So I would like to ask about glossophobia. Just one of the major fears. So how better breathing can help to overcome this fear and a lot of other fears and phobias, specifically this glossophobia, when you are on the stage and you get that anxiety, and so how to overcome that?
Well, any kind of phobia comes back to what Tanya was talking about. There's a panic, isn't there? There's some kind of hyper-arousal. So out there in the world, the standard knee-jerk instruction, if there is hyper-arousal that you want to control, because you don't want the audience to see what a kind of shaking, kind of traumatized wreck you actually are, you want to be able to pretend, yeah? So you want to be in control, yeah? Do you? Yeah. Okay. So you want to control your hyper-arousal. You want to control your shaking, you want to control your fear, and you want to control it to the point that nobody sees it, yeah? That's what you want.
Obviously, while giving the presentations, and it really counts, because if you're having that hyper-arousal, you obviously get, distracted, and, your concentration level shifts. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's quite difficult to appear cool, calm, and collected when you're having a panic attack inside. I understand. It's quite difficult. So you want to be able to control all that, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the standard instruction is to down-regulate. Yeah, this is the standard instruction. Some of the people who've contributed before, they would have been taught to teach you how to down-regulate. So you want to turn the volume down. So you want to breathe in a way that turns the volume down. So there are many variables in the breathing. Yeah. If you watch somebody's breathing, there's many variables that make up their breathing pattern. So for example, there is frequency, there is speed, there is depth, there is how steady or gentle it, how gradual it is. You can breathe like this, or you can breathe like this.
That sounds relaxing.
You want to go for the second one, yeah? You want to go for the second one. Yeah, well, there you've got your answer. Okay, you like the gradual, yeah? So if you want to down-regulate, you don't want to breathe staccato, you don't want to breathe fast, you want to breathe gradual. So the gradualness, the controlled gradualness, the in and the out breath is one main factor in what calms you down or turns up the volume or turns down the volume. Then there is where is the breathing, like other people have said before, there is belly breathing and there's chest breathing. Normally, if you want to calm down, what's the instruction? What's the instruction for calming down, for down regulating?
Belly breathing.
Belly breathing, yes, exactly. And emphasizing the out breath. Yeah? Your consciousness wants to be more with the out breath. So you breathe in, and then you breathe into your belly, and then you breathe out. And you make the out breath long, because nothing terrible is going to happen. No tiger is going to eat you. You don't have to be shaking like an antelope. Life is fine. So that's how you breathe.
This is actually I experienced while swimming. This is exactly what happened. Like my mind just gets so calm and relaxed while doing all the strokes. Especially when I float, I just feel amazing, out of this world actually. So I actually want to experience this kind of calmness while giving the presentation.
Yes. Well, yes, there you've got. Yes. Yeah, you just reinvented a therapeutic technique. This is what they do in neurolinguistic programming. You basically know that your system, you as a complex, mysterious being that you are, you somewhere have the resources for blissfully floating. They happen when you're in the sea and when you're swimming. So you know it's possible. How come it's not possible when you're standing in front of 500,000 people and, they all look at you? Why can't you access that resource? Doesn't make any sense, does it? You should, because you can.
But,
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sure. Go on.
So the neurolinguistic programming technique is how to access that resource, as you've just already implied. You access that resource, the state of swimming, the state of floating. You access that when you're preparing for the presentation. And then you try kind of remind yourself in the presentation of that state. So ideally, what they do in neurolinguistic programming is that they use what they call an anchor. I've lost you. I can't see your image. Hang on. Let's put you so I can look at you whilst we're doing this. Hang on. Pin video. There you are. Okay.
Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay.
Do you know why I want to see you? I want to see the panic in you whilst we're talking. The panic that you're hiding.
I'm in control right now.
Are you? Yeah, you fancy yourself. That's good. Okay, you're in control.
I'm just assuming that swimming state and the
exactly. Yeah, good. See, that's how it works. Okay, so why don't you just access it properly? How can you access? No, you're not there. No, don't fob me off. No. I'm not there. You see, this is the best it gets when you're floating in the sea. No, you're fobbing me off. No, come on, access the floating state. So you're there more now. That's good. So now whilst you're there, don't change anything. Just allow yourself to float. Just expand into the floating. And then notice your breathing as you're doing it. Just the sensations of the breathing in your body. And what actually is your breathing? How is your body doing the breathing right now?
Gradual breathing.
Yeah, gradual. That's one. Yeah, it's not fast. It's not forced. It's gradual. Yeah. So notice the in breath and the out breath. So for everybody else, I don't know whether you can see, but I'm actually synchronizing my breathing with hers. Did you see that? It's not particularly deliberate. I just sort of do it out of habit. But I'm noticing myself doing it. So I'm joining her in the state. Yeah. So what do you notice about the breathing when you're sort of halfway there? You're sort of maybe 65% there, but there's another 35% to go. So let's see whether we can get a bit more there. So what do you notice about your breathing actually? The actual sensations of your breathing right now?
It's getting calmer.
Yes.
But I'm still a bit anxious.
Yes, exactly. There's some kind of holding going on. So do you notice how she's holding her neck? She's bending her head back a bit. And did you all see that? Because you're trying. There's some, like, do you remember the person who was talking before about how some parts of her body are flowing and other parts are not? So when you're doing this exercise with me, then one part of your body is straining. Your neck. In your neck, there was some kind of straining. You were trying to be a good...
My neck usually remains stiff.
Yes.
And this is the part of body where I feel more stressed and, tense.
Okay, yeah. So that part of your body, the straining neck, is not coming along for the ride when we go floating.
Yeah.
That part of your body limits the floating. The straining energy, the straining impulse in the neck limits the completeness of the floating that you're trying to access. And when you're giving a presentation, that straining in the neck goes bananas. That goes really into overdrive. So the balance between the straining and the floating gets really one-sided when you're giving a presentation. And you're shaking your head. And what? What's funny?
My neck is not with me, actually. I am trying, but yes, it's holding her.
Yes, exactly. So can you do that? Did you notice that what you did with your fists? It's holding out. You did that. Just for a second. You demonstrated to me. Did you know that? Hello?
Yes, you're asking me?
Yeah, of course. Did you notice that you made this gesture? You said, my neck is not with me. It's holding out. And then you made your fists like that. Do you remember? You remember?
Yes.
Can you do that for a second? What your neck is doing gets demonstrated by you making this gesture. Yeah, that's what your neck is doing. Okay. So can you make the gesture? No, you were having fists. Did you all see how she cannot do it? She cannot. The gesture that she made to demonstrate the neck to me, she can't repeat it.
Yeah,
it just was very spontaneous. Yeah. So now we're getting.
She doesn't even remember it.
Yes, she doesn't remember it exactly because it was very spontaneous.
Exactly.
So now it's getting dangerous. What's your name?
Amber.
Amre?
Amber.
Amber. So Amber, now it's getting dangerous. Do you feel? We're getting into dangerous territory.
How?
You can't make the gesture that was demonstrating the neck. The neck, you say, is not with you. The neck is like another person. There's another Amber that has a tight neck. And if we wanted to to get a flavor of what the tight neck amber is like, she makes this gesture. There's a gesture like that. She's tight. There's another amber inside you. The part of your body that's tight. There's two of you. There's the one that wants to float and can float, and there's the tight one. The tight one has a feeling of pain and fear and trauma in it. And you're trying to hide her from the world, like most of us would. Now, you didn't sign up for this, did you? You just stumbled into this, okay? But you see, this is the amber you're trying to get rid of. When you're asking me, how can Michael please give me some instructions to kill her off altogether, especially during presentations? I don't want to kill her off. Why would I want to kill her off? She's just as much you as the other one. I know that the floating state is more blissful and pleasurable, but it's a bit as if you want to walk on one leg. You only want to walk on the leg that's pleasurable. But if you want to walk, you need to walk both of you. You don't want to get rid of that one.
Yes, I'm getting you.
The last thing she needs is somebody to come along with the breathing technique to knock her over the head and annihilate her. You see, the two different ambers, they need different kinds of therapy. One who wants to be functional in front of a crowd needs she needs a particular set of breathwork instructions about breathing out and floating, and she wants that. But the traumatized one needs a completely different kind of therapy. A whole completely different set of instructions, including breathing instructions. She needs to breathe differently. So those two therapies, those two ambers are in opposition. They're at odds with each other. I don't just want to do therapy for one of you. I'm thinking of you as a whole being. And if you want to walk through life, you need both legs, not just one. You don't want to be hopping along on some kind of, hyper performance leg.
Sometimes three.
That's right.
Can I ask a question?
I don't know. It depends on Amber.
Yes. I just want to add, Michael, thank you so much. This is such an amazing and wonderful exploration you have just mentioned about me. And I'm just wondering all of the things that you were mentioning. So thank you for the new exploration. And yes, I have two kinds of amber inside me, and I need to float with both of them. So thank you so much.
That's your conclusion. It isn't quite my conclusion, but thank you for your conclusion. Okay, thanks. Let's leave it there. Okay. Look, there's lots and lots more questions, but don't you think we want a break for a little while? Are you not some of you getting tired of sitting in front of a screen?
Yes, let's have a break now, please.
Yes, please.
How long do you want to break for? What do you think is a reasonable, useful amount of time to have a break?
20 minutes at least. 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
You could be back at 2:30 with prayer and
maybe,
lunch
but
and everything wrapped up.
Yeah, 20 minutes will do enough.
Maybe 20 or 15 minutes.
I suggest we.
For Zuhar prayer too.
What's the time now in Pakistan?
1:52.
I can't hear.
1:52. 1:52.
Oh yeah, okay. So let's come back at 1:15, yeah?
Okay, all right.
That's fine.
Also, Michael, can we please come back and conclude this thing a little, because I feel it's hanging in the middle.
Can't hear.
I wanted to request that when we come back, can we conclude this a little, because I feel that it's just like hanging in the middle.
We're in the middle of a million things. There's so many incomplete things.
Yeah.
So yes, You go off and have a nice break, and I break my head over the next 20 minutes of all these thousands of things that we've started. How many we can actually complete? Yes, I will break my head over that now. I'll have a lovely 20 minutes worrying about that.
Good luck.
Enjoy. Have
Okay,
fun.
thank you.
Michael,
Yeah.
I have a small question regarding, can you please differentiate between hypoarousal and hyperarousal?
Yes, I will. I think that's one of the things we want to do. Yes, definitely.
And how you were demonstrating different kinds of breath frequency and all of those things. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right then.
Can I put my question after the break?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
Michael,
you.
I could really relate with what you did with Amber, the two selves, and
Yes.
you mentioned that both of them would need separate, separate therapies.
Opposite.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I could really relate. It was really close to me. I could really relate
Yes.
with it.
It relates to most people. Yes, I understand.
Yeah, I think I'm really
Michael, could you?
what two therapies, like what you mentioned,
Yeah.
that these two selves would require, their requirement is two different things. So
Yes, I know.
So I would need a demo on that, Michael. How
Well,
you-
we need 1,000 demos on that. Yes. Go off and have a break.
One last thing. Could you
Yes,
also
go on.
touch upon your own personal experience, your own journey with breath work, and then any example of a client you've worked with long time and how they've been so-called, overcome their issues through breath work? If you could touch,
Okay.
especially if you could touch upon your own personal journey with breath work, because that would
Okay.
kind of, yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Let Michael have a break, please. I'm feeling really protected.
I know. All right, then. See you at
Time
1/4
boundaries
past.
are important, guys. Time boundaries. It's time for a break.
Okay, I'll see you at 1/4 past.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
But we haven't really had any like solid stuff in terms of like, I'm sitting here taking notes. There's hardly 5 things I'm coming off with. I understand that everybody's coming from different levels in terms of, some people are taking the level 3 course, other people have been counselors for many years. But I think a workshop should be given in a format where it's like you assume that the person is coming at 0 regarding the topic that you're coming with, and just be given a lot of different, like I was expecting, for example, there would be given different techniques and different things. So when I walk away from a workshop that's from 11:30 to 4, then I would really have a better understanding of, breathing techniques, et cetera, because this is something I know 0 about. And so far it's 2:15, 2:20, and I have barely learned anything in that sense. There's so many topics being thrown, so many experiences being thrown, more than the actual, any kind of agenda structure for the workshop. And I feel highly disappointed because I took out my time, paid for the workshop, and I really expected more out of it, because again, this is what these workshops are supposed to be providing, something more in-depth and concrete for us to really benefit from.
Are you breathing?
Now I am.
Huh?
Yeah.
After you've spoken. Okay.
Basically.
What was your breathing like whilst you were complaining?
I mean, I would really prefer it if you would address like the content.
Yes, I know. I got the content. I got the content. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
I need to get on with it. Look, what's your name? Safa?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we've only got like a couple of hours, so I better make sure that Safa is satisfied by the end of it. So I can't take many more questions. Go on then.
Okay, so I think he'll be satisfied after this question. So my question has 2 parts to it, and it's related to trauma. So when you come to trauma therapy, yeah, and as if I'm the counselor, I cannot be feeling anything other than confident, and I also have to be quite familiar enough with trauma itself to be going into work that is related to trauma, right? I mean, if I'm not confident, would you advise a counselor if he's not confident? Because that would mean there's a fear maybe of re-traumatizing. And
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
So it's a common, this is a common misconception. I mean, there's a difference between re-traumatizing and if you let it happen naturally, and the process can happen naturally. And is there a difference between re-traumatizing the client if the therapist or the counselor is scared?
Let me interrupt you. We're taking too much time. I don't get your question. Don't do anything that you're not comfortable with, generally speaking. Don't blindly experiment. Let's get on with what Safa was asking for. Let me talk now for a bit. I'll give you some basic principles. Yeah. I'm not going to give you particular breathing techniques only, not mainly. If that's what you were looking for, it's the wrong workshop. Because as I said, one of the main problems about breath work out there in the world is that people think they can give instructions that are going to work for everybody based on the instructor's own experience. There is no general instruction that you can give that works for all the people all the time. Now, most breath work is taught like that if you breathe into the belly, down. If you breathe into the chest, you will maybe make things more alive. If you have a panic attack, you breathe into a paper bag, or hyperventilate, you breathe into a paper bag. These general instructions cannot work for all the people. Some of the time they work. Like a clock that stands still is still right twice a day. If you do the same thing all the time with everybody, occasionally you will have somebody where the thing works. But that is, as far as I'm concerned, is too random and too knee-jerk and too blindly using technique without understanding the principles. So let me give you some of the principles. The first principle that we need to talk about, I'll say one more other thing before I give you the principle. So one of the great fallacies of most breath work is the assumption that the person has conscious control over their breathing and can follow your instructions. That flies in the face of the recognition that the way I breathe, the way anybody breathes, the way people breathe is a compromise from within a lifetime of habit. And that habit, in some languages of therapy, we call that character. We don't mean character in the sense of a strong character. Character is a technical term that means it's like a kind of character. The person who came up with it called it character armor. It's like a protection. It's like a carapace. There is a defensive organization that protects you against the experience of developmental trauma. So people's breathing habit, breathing pattern is part of their character. People don't breathe the way they choose to breathe. People don't breathe in a way that follows instructions of how they should be breathing. People breathe unconsciously from within their character position. The breathing habit is an expression of the lifetime of trauma and protection against trauma. And before you do anything, any instruction, any technique, you want to connect and have some kind of felt sense and perception of the client's character. Are you with me, Safa? Do you understand what I'm saying? Any questions about what I said? Because you said I should start from zero. So
no, so far.
Okay, yeah. So you understand that this is not how 95% of breathwork gets taught, yeah? 95% of breathwork gives you techniques that the assumption is you can use with anybody, you know, at any time, and they will have the same effect on everybody. No. That is a fallacy. It depends what the person starts with. Whatever input you give and the effect it has depends upon what you start with and what is the person's breathing pattern to begin with and what is the emotional habit and function of that breathing pattern. So you need to understand, have some felt understanding of that. In simple terms, somebody who's constantly frantic and hyper-aroused has a different starting point from somebody who's a bit numb and dissociated and depressed. Yeah, that would be the spectrum. The same technique would have completely different effects on these different kinds of people, depending on their habit, character, and breathing pattern. The second problem about most breathing work is, as I mentioned earlier, is the assumption is that the instructor is being experienced by the client as a benign helper that gives instructions, helpful instructions that the client wants to follow and can follow. There's no evidence that this assumption has much bearing on reality. As we said before, and quite a few of the contributions kind of gave examples of that, because basically people were saying these things because they were felt relieved that today somebody is finally coming along and saying, no, the body is not a safe place, actually. You can't take that for granted. So people were then coming forward, and I gave space to people coming forward, because this is actually quite unusual for somebody to say, no, the body is not your home. Breathing doesn't make you feel safe necessarily. No, it's very individual and it's very mixed. And actually, if you go really precise, you notice there are certain parts of the body. It's not even certain people. For some people, it's like that, and other people, it's like that. No, within the same person, at certain times, you float, and at certain times, you shake when you're giving a presentation. There's two people inside the person. And another person said earlier, there's different parts of the body. There are some parts of the body that feel available to be instructed, to be invited into expansion and flow. There's other places of the body. We talked about the neck, for example. For some people, the neck is not available for instructions because it's tight and rigid and it's scared. So this distinction between different people and different people's habits is not even valid across people, across time, because there's different parts of you that respond differently in different parts of your body that are available for instruction or relaxation or expansion, and other places in your being, in your body-mind system are not. So that means, in simple terms, that the instructor cannot be assumed to be received. The instructions cannot be assumed to be followed. And that's on a psychotherapeutic relational level. We understand that the idea of a benign, helpful instructor is compromised by what we call the transference. Safa, are you with me? Do you know what we mean by transference?
It's when the client takes on, basically it starts having certain, like projecting some person on like the therapist, right? Like imagining
That's
them
right,
to
exactly.
or whatever.
So transference has the idea of a transfer in it, so that the client unconsciously transfers previous experience into the present moment with the therapist. Yeah? So out there in the world of breath work and breath work instructions, the assumption is that all of the client can see the instructor therapist for who they are and all of the client feels safe and receptive to the instructor, the therapist, the counselor, whatever. That completely ignores the transference. That completely ignores the fact that the client will transfer previous experience, previous relational experience, including previous trauma experience, into the current moment, into the present moment, and into the person in front of them. So the transfer is from previous potentially traumatic, developmental, traumatic experience into and onto the therapist. That means whatever the therapist does or doesn't do, whatever instructions they give, whether it's breath work or anything else, it cannot be assumed to be received by all of the client in a benign way. Am I making any sense?
Yeah.
So that little piece of wisdom is worth twice what you paid for the workshop. Okay? Because you can attend lots of other workshops where that crucial piece of information will not be given to you. And that crucial piece of information can mess up the best breathwork instructions you can ever dream of. Because the client, it's not a question of whether you give competent instructions or whether you use the right technique. The main thing is whether the client system is receptive to it, and whether any instruction that you give actually lands in the client, not in their mind. It lands in their body, in their being, whether it actually, the instruction you give is being received and is being, whether all of the client's being is receptive to it. So do you remember when we were wasting time earlier talking to Amber? Do you remember that bit? When we were getting lost in process? Yeah. Mm. Do you remember? Say again? When we were getting lost in process with Amber. So do you remember how I was giving instructions for her to float?
Yes.
Do you remember the moment when she said, I'm there. I'm in the floating. Yeah? Do you remember that, Safa?
Yes.
Do you remember the next thing I said? Or you were so frustrated with me wasting time that you didn't pay attention? It's all right. So the next thing I said was, no, not all of you is in the floating experience. Yeah? She thought, her mind was fancying that she was completely in the floating experience, but she wasn't. It was just an idea in her mind, because her neck wasn't in floating. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that means that the mind, her mind was in some kind of wishful thinking, that the floating experience was more comprehensive than it was actually being. Am I making sense? So it's very important in that moment that I don't get fooled, that I don't get fobbed off by her saying, yes, I'm already there. It's very important that I have a separate perception on the basis of which I can say, no, not all of you is in the floating. If you want to import the floating from the sea into the presentation later, you first need to fully be able to access the floating. You think you are, but you're not. I can see that even from the outside, even with screens and remoteness, I can see that not all of your body, not all of your being is in the floating experience. How do I see that? I can see that her neck is like this. Do you remember that? She was remembering the floating, and her neck was like this. So do you remember what I said? I said, you are straining. Your neck gives me the impression, I'm perceiving, that there's a part of your being that's now straining. If you're straining, clearly the part of you in the neck that's straining and the part of your mind that is straining clearly is not floating. Yeah? You feel the opposition there between the straining part, the straining experience, and the floating experience. They are opposites. Am I making any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I was a normal breathwork instructor, I would just keep going. I would say, okay, breathe into the floating. Now feel yourself floating. You're in the sea. Feel in your toes, in your fingers. You can feel the water around you. And she would be straining to approximate the experience. So then both of us are ignoring the fact that we're doing our damnedest to create a floating experience, but we're straining to do it. It's a contradiction. It's not going to wholesomely work. Yeah? Am I making any sense? So these are the basic starting points that you want to take into account before you use any technique. Now, if you want to go away from the workshop with some kind of assumption that I'm going to give you a list of techniques and then you can apply them to people regardless, I don't want to do that, because I can guarantee it's not going to work. Half the time, maybe 10% of the time, it's going to work. 20%. But you will not understand why sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It will be random to you. It'll be just, you'll be like a headless chicken, trying different techniques without being able to evaluate why sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So I would much rather waste the time giving you the fundamental principles. Okay.
I struggled with breathwork all my life, and this is the first time someone identified it as unsafe place.
Yes.
Trauma or why my body rejects.
Yes. So this is the starting point, is that we do not think the person is in control of their breath. We understand that the breathing pattern is part of their character, which means it's part of their protection. And you do not want to blindly override somebody's protection mechanism, which they have carefully developed over years. And you don't just want to storm in there like a bull in a china shop, having all kinds of clever ideas about how they should be breathing, and thereby override the protection mechanism, which is there for a purpose. So, yeah, go on.
Michael, can I just say something here?
I'm listening.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, but what you're saying, actually, I resonate with that, because a client just came into my mind, and what you said about breath work. So for him, breathing, like, you know, when we talk about breath work, it invites like an induced transference, right? And that's like a mummy transference.
Yes.
And for him, it's like you are the mummy giving instructions and he's the child.
Exactly. Yes, that would be a very good illustration, example of what I'm talking about. Yes, go on.
So I just wanted to say that, of course, I mean, I don't think there is one set of rules.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
And then there's another client, for him, every time he goes deep, so he looks on his left and he says, and then all of a sudden he comes back. He breathes and he comes back into the present moment. So for him, it's a safe place, a place of refuge, where he comes back and then he's in the here and now. So it's very different. Both are like polar opposites.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So before we add more chaos to already a chaotic situation, we want to have some kind of principle for appreciating the particular individual pattern that we're starting with, that we're working with.
Yes.
So the main principle for that is that it's a conflicted system, and it's a conflicted system that includes defenses against past trauma. Yeah? I could talk about that for 2 hours, but let's just keep it there. Those of you who go through level 4 and level 5, you will become acquainted with different ideas, different models of developmental trauma, and how that becomes a body-mind process. You can, if you want to read about that, I can give a reference. You can read Stephen Johnson, Character Styles, the first chapter on character formation. So that's our starting point. The second thing is then that we realize that it's like a kind of like a little insect that has developed a hard shell, yeah? Like a carapace. So that carapace is like a an armor, like a shield that stops the animal breathing, pulsating. You can also imagine a little amoeba. Wilhelm Reich did studies with amoeba. And you can imagine that the protection mechanisms that we develop as children, the defense systems, protection systems we develop, that they interfere, they harden us, they build like a barrier, and that barrier interferes with the organism pulsating. Life, and especially manifesting in the breath, is a pulsation. Now the question is, how deeply can my body pulsate? How much can I expand, and then how much can I let go? This is a kind of a learned habit from the whole of my biography. So the character protection hardenings, the tensions, the contractions of character interfere with the free pulsation. If you look at a baby, when it feels safe, and how the baby breathes, that's like when you see a human animal organism breathing without restriction, pulsating without restriction, when there's a natural breathing cycle and when there is a natural pulsation. What ideally we want for everybody, for what I want for my clients, what probably you want for your clients, is that they regain this kind of natural organismic pulsation quality of aliveness without having to think about it. The problem with most breathwork instructions is that people's minds are encouraged to think about their breathing and to guide and instruct their own breathing. Okay, some of the time that might have good benefits. But ultimately what I want is, I don't want you to have to be thinking about your breathing all the time. I want you to get on with life. I want you to have a vibrant experience where you're not distracted by having to think about your breathing. I want you to be breathing as fully and naturally without having to think about it. Am I making any sense? The aim is not for us to have discipline, a disciplined mind that tells my body how to breathe. Maybe temporarily, if I'm really traumatized or if I'm hyperventilating or if I'm in a panic, maybe for a while I need some instructions. But that cannot be the final destination. The final destination is that you return to some deep natural pulsation, where you feel, where your breathing feeds your aliveness. Even just on the most banal biochemical level of oxygen, you need breathing, you need to breathe deeply in order to feel alive. You need oxygen for your metabolism. So,
but Michael, there was one thing that I would like to point out here.
Yeah.
You do need to, yes, natural breathing is essential because you don't want to get more anxious by concentrating too much on breathing. But then you do need to do corrective breathing because lots of us, majority, they do not know how to do correct.
Yes, I know. Exactly. I understand. So this is the conundrum. This is why we're doing a more complicated thing than what Safa was expecting. Yeah. Because A, you cannot do the same instruction for everybody. B, lots of people's breathing is compromised and restricted, but it's not going to be solved by mental instruction. By mental instructions which somebody else gives you, or mental instructions which you absorb and your mind gives you. It's the deep problem of natural breathing is not going to be solved by that. It's just a stepping stone. It's just an experiment en route. Any instruction that we might give, the best attitude towards it is that it's an experiment. Like I said earlier, I think to Faraz or something, I said, in principle, we could all just be experimenting with different kinds of breathing and what effect they have on our emotional and mental and consciousness state. Yeah? So all these instructions, yeah, go on.
At
thank you so much. I have been, there are a lot of aha moments today for me. But I wanted to add to something you said. It really depends on who is giving the instructions.
Yes.
I think not only it depends on who, it depends when. So, you know, when I first time took therapy 10, 12 years ago, the therapist who was in the CBT arena, she gave me breathing exercises. And I am a survivor of child abuse. And it was a very traumatic, re-traumatic experience for me. And she was so overwhelmed by it that she got upset with me.
I understand.
And we worked in the same university, so it became a bit complicated. So what happened, what she did by, you know, untimely doing it to me, she also put me off therapy. So for another 10 years, I didn't go to another therapist. And then when I went to my current therapist and I told her, this was 2.5 years ago, that, you know, this is my previous experience, she said, and I now know that she does a lot of breath work. She didn't touch breath work. I think today, now that I'm listening to you, that today I can go and tell her, okay, you can do breath work with me.
Okay.
But I couldn't have done it without that 2.5-year therapy, that the work she has done with me already. So, you know, it's not only who, it is when. When is the
I
person
understand. Yes.
who are treating is ready. So today maybe, and thank you, Michael, I'm realizing so many things. I have tears in my eyes, connecting so many dots today, that, you know, today I can probably go back to my therapist and say, I can probably try breathing techniques.
Michael, can
Thank
I
you.
just one
Hang
more?
on, go slow. No, shush. I just want to stay with the moment of the feeling there. Thank you. I found that very moving. I just wanted to acknowledge that. And that is a good example. If we want to, I'm looking at Safa and she's getting impatient. So if we extract the principle from this, then we understand that no breathing instruction happens outside of a relational container. And when you talk about it depends who and when, what we're talking about is not mainly who the therapist is trying to be, who the therapist was 10 years ago, who the therapist is now. We're talking about the client's subjective unconscious experience of the therapist. The relational container is not something that the therapist can consciously decide or legislate. The relational container is something that the client's unconscious needs to experience. And it's usually a mixture. It's partly safe and partly unsafe. And we want to understand that most likely the client will experience us as this mixture, regardless of the fact that I'm there with my most empathic, helpful, benign intentions. The client's body is likely to experience me as a mixture, maybe as an authority. Like you said about, you know, there's mommy giving instructions for breathing, and then the client doesn't cooperate because they feel imposed upon, or they feel judged or shamed. Or you give them a breathing instruction and the client feel they can't do it and they feel humiliated. So these are all examples where the therapist could be sitting there thinking, well, I'm doing my technique, I'm giving these instructions. Why is the client bloody resisting? Well, because they don't feel safe with you. Not their conscious mind, but their unconscious. Their body doesn't feel safe with you. That's nothing necessarily to do with you. That may be the transference. The client's body is experiencing transference. They're transferring some past difficult relationship onto you. You want to clock that. You don't want to override that. You don't want to blindly keep going with your instructions or breathing technique or any technique, because you want to clock that at this point, part of the client and part of the client's body is experiencing you through the transference. Okay.
Can
So,
I say something, Michael? When Elam was talking, I was noticing her breath. I'm sure you did too. And I felt that it was a lot of, she was breathing very deeply when she was sharing.
yes, because it's a bloody relief for somebody to not ram breathing instructions down your throat and trying to make you feel better. Yes, it's a relief. So you breathe more deeply because it's a relief. Yeah. Okay, next principle. The cycle. The baby breathes naturally in a pulsating cycle. character defenses interfere with the pulsation. That means cycles of experience get interrupted. Most of you know that this is an idea from Gestalt therapy, yeah? The cycle of Gestalt formation and destruction. Human experience happens in cycles. These cycles are not just in the mind or in the feeling, they're also in the body. So we have different models. I don't want to go into any kind of detail, but I'm going to share my screen just to give you the idea that human experience goes through cycles, and there are models that people have developed to describe the stages of that cycle. The cycle of emotional expression is directly relevant to the breathing cycle. The breathing, the fullness of the breathing cycle, in breath and out breath, is directly related to the overall cycle of emotional expression and the overall capacity for pulsation. In breath expansion, out breath relaxation. The more deeply the organism can pulsate, the more vibrant your experience of life. Most clients who come to therapy, they don't come to therapy necessarily say, I want a more vibrant experience of life. They don't say that. It's an implicit longing. They may say, oh, so I want to do better presentations. But deep down, there is some longing to have a more vibrant, full experience of life. Because the person feels, without even necessarily saying so, they feel restricted by their own protection mechanisms. They have built the protection mechanisms, they've perfected them to a point that life inside is suffocated and can't pulsate. So we want to understand how pulsation gets restricted or interfered with, how cycles become incomplete. So I share my screen. Hang on, let me try and do that. How I share screen. Host is, Ali, I need help. The host has disabled the attendee screen sharing. Ali, I need help. I want to share my screen.
Okay, Michael. Give me.
No, still. So I'm waiting for Ali to enable screen sharing. So one of the main models that we have is Gestalt, the Gestalt cycle of expression, of Gestalt formation and destruction. And you will see there are several stages. Any cycle you can cut into many slices in your mind. It doesn't matter how you conceptualize it, but basically there are two phases. There's the up phase, in breath, which is about energizing. And there is the second half of the cycle, which is about once some kind of expression or contact has occurred, there's the downside where you integrate the experience. Ready to share the screen? No?
Oh, Michael, I need
yeah,
a couple
okay.
of minutes to do that.
Oh, you need a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, I'll
if you
entertain.
make Michael the co-host, he can share the screen. If you make Michael co-host, he can share the
that
screen.
would be good. You are the co-host now. Yes, I am. I am the co-host. Okay, here we go. Look, I share my screen. So the most simple image for the cycle, this is the Gestalt cycle. Hang on. There. Oops. Bring your shared window to the front. Hang on. Here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
The cycle of Gestalt formation. You can see the.
Michael, can you zoom out a little?
Zoom out a little. Yeah, maybe. No, hang on. I can't.
We can do it by just double clicking the screen.
We can do it in our own devices. That's not an issue.
Yeah.
Here we go. I don't want to get into any detail. If you train as a Gestalt therapist, you can spend 3 months of training on this. Yeah, just this cycle, all the different stages, how that's relevant to the contact between client and therapist, how you work with that. These arrows are called contact disturbances. There's different ways in which human beings interfere with the fullness of the contact, both.
Michael, I would like
Yeah.
to take your permission to take a screenshot of this. Can we do that?
That's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm happy to share these things afterwards. It's out there in the public domain. This is I've just drawn my version of it, but it's out there. This is the cycle of Gestalt formation, and these are contact disturbances. So that's one image that you can use. Or this one, I used in the 1990s. You can see it's very old. It's based on a woman called Gerda Boysen. So there's these. Can you see that? Can you see my mouse moving there? Can you see my cursor? Yeah. So there's the impulse. There is expression of the impulse. And then there is a kind of relaxation and melting, or you could say there's the integration phase. So there's different biochemistry that happens in the two phases. There's different kind of breathing that happens in the two phases. The whole body goes through these cycles. So here you have more the sympathetic, it says here in the box, the sympathetic nervous system is preparing for action. So everything that the sympathetic system needs, all the biochemicals, the muscular preparation, the metabolism, there's a whole complex system response that manifests the increasing charge. There is more intensity charge that builds up. So this is the first half of the cycle. Yeah, go on.
Michael, I think we're viewing another image, a different image to what you are referring to.
Hang on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm also a bit lost at the, yeah.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
Why is that? Hang on.
We're looking at the cycle of Gestalt formation.
Yes.
And there are no boxes that say the things you're saying.
No, I moved on to a different thing. Hang on. Sorry.
But you'll have to reshare. You have to do a new share and then share the new image.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm really obviously not quite familiar with the technology. Resume share. Look, I'm clicking on resume share, stop share. Okay, I'll make another share. Okay, here, look. This is the one that I wanted you to see. So this is the one I was going on to because I don't want to dwell on it. Here, this one. Okay, do you all have that? The vasomotoric cycle. You see that?
Yes. Now
It's just another model of the cycle. So I was talking about the two phases. There's the build-up phase. When I talk about turning up the volume, we're talking about the impulse gaining more charge, leading to expression. And then there's the second half of the cycle, which is about discharge and melting and relaxation and integration of the experience. And I was saying that these two halves of the cycle have very different bodily and biochemical and physiological manifestations. So for the first half of the cycle, you have sympathetic preparation for action, including adrenaline. And the second half of the cycle is mainly influenced by the parasympathetic system. The sympathetic system is sort of when the body prepares for action on the outside, outer action. And parasympathetic is when outer action is over and there's more internal action, like the internal organs, digestion, they start working. So that's parasympathetic, and that's more associated with relaxation. So all human experience can be conceptualized as going through these cycles, and these cycles can be interrupted, like in the Gestalt formation and the contact disturbances, contact and intensity. The cycle can be interrupted at any point. There's many interruptions that are possible. So this is directly relevant to breathing and the fullness of breathing, the fullness of expansion and relaxation. We want to understand that the breathing cycle is one expression of this vasomotoric cycle of human experience. Am I making any sense? Okay, so there's one more thing. There's one other similar picture I could just show you. This one is basically the same thing, but slightly different. Just to get across the idea that the cycle, in the way that we are aware of it, goes through various levels of body-mind experience. So it starts more unconscious in the somatic inside the body, then it becomes more an emotional experience. There's, when the charge builds up, it starts with sensations, then it moves into emotion, and then it sort of reaches the mind. That's how you can think about it. It's not the truth. It's just one model. But it starts, the impulse, the cycle starts in the body, goes through emotion and reaches the mind. And then there can be some kind of body, emotion, mind expression, maybe in relation to another person. And then once that expression has happened, then there is the second half of the cycle where there is more integration and relaxation and the kind of melting feeling. Yeah? Like there's a kind of melting feeling inside. When a baby breathes fully, in breath, deep, expansive, out breath, relaxation, melting, there's the possibility of a kind of streaming in the body on the out breath, which is like a mini orgasm, like a little streaming sensation on the out breath. This is what the person Amber, who wanted the floating, this is what she's longing for. Some kind of deep floating experience, which is internally pleasurable. It's like a mini orgasm. This is possible when there is no interruptions to the breathing. In order to feel this kind of pleasurable streaming in the inside of your body, on the out breath, you need to have a full in-breath. The in-breath needs to generate the energy that you then relax to. Am I making any sense? Yeah. So these are the principles of breathing that we want to pay attention to. Now the problem is, these are ideas that many people who are into breath work also share. Yeah? These basic ideas of the breathing, the cycle, full breathing, the pulsation, these are ideas shared by most models or techniques of breath work. This is not rocket science. The problem now that we've talked about today repeatedly is that even if, as the therapist, you have the best model in the world and the best techniques in the world, in order to make the client benefit from them, there needs to be some kind of emotional interaction, and the client's system, not just the client's mind, the client's system, their body mind needs to be receptive. Now that's much more complex and compromised, as we said, because the person has these habitual protection mechanisms, their character armor, and so they are not available for the full pulsation. They're not available for your instructions to help them into full pulsation, because if they could follow your instructions, then the volume would turn up, then the flood of past feeling would come, and then the trauma that is like debris on the shoreline would get reactivated. So that's why the client system is reluctant to follow your instructions, because deep down they feel the symptoms of trauma already on the horizon. Yeah? So that the client's body-mind system resists your instruction because they are still trying to protect against the trauma from coming to the surface. Making any sense?
Michael, there's one question. Is it always related to trauma, or can it be because of fear and phobias also?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
I'm not talking about terrible trauma only. Huh? There's trauma, the whole idea of character formation could be all kinds of trauma. It's not just active trauma. It's not just brutal trauma. It's not just physical abuse or sexual abuse. No, there's all kinds of trauma. Or, more emotional trauma, feeling not recognized, not feeling validated, feeling abandoned. There's many kinds of trauma. So that means, yeah, go on.
I have a question, but do you have time? If you're
I don't know. Ask Safa.
It's okay. You can continue. It's not that.
Okay. I want to talk about the window of tolerance. if we are not blindly assuming that the client system, like everybody else's client system, that the client system is not just receptive to instructions, but that the client system, to start with, has a breathing habit which is a compromise. So that compromise operates in their window of tolerance. So many of you are familiar with this, but for those of you who are not, I'll just put on the screen the idea of the window of tolerance. Okay. Okay, the window of tolerance. So can you see this? The window of tolerance. This is a model that we get from trauma work and the neuroscience of trauma work. This is the window of tolerance in which the client is comfortable. This is where they operate. This may be a very limited window, small window, with not a lot of breathing or not a lot of pulsation. But the window of tolerance in their individual manifestation hovers somewhere between the threat of hyperarousal on the red, flight, fight, overwhelm. This is the overwhelm. This would be the overwhelming re-experiencing of trauma. Yeah? And the way the body, the system copes with trauma is to some extent to go into hypoarousal. So some parts of the body are hyperaroused, some parts of the body are hypoaroused. That means they are frozen. It's like numbness, dissociation. Yeah? Yeah? So the person operates in some limited zone in between these two threatening extremes. And I'm not going to go on about it, but in the olden days, people assumed, like 20 years ago, people assumed that the main purpose of trauma therapy is to take the person into their comfort zone, to help them strengthen their safe feeling of safety in the comfort zone. Over the last 10 years or so, 8 years or so, people have changed their tune completely, trauma people, and they've said, no, if you want to do effective trauma therapy, you need to work at the edge of the window of tolerance. Because here you can make the person so comfortable that the trauma never gets addressed and never gets resolved. So you want to be working at the edge of the window of tolerance some of the time. You don't want to re-traumatize them. You don't want to kind of, hopefully, the edge of the window of tolerance doesn't turn into complete overwhelm and re-traumatization or into complete numbing and freezing. But you want to work at the edge of the window of tolerance. And that's, to some extent, where breathing can come in as a principle. So because breathing is an intensity regulator, and so breathing, different kinds of breathing can have the effect of shifting the intensity in this direction or in this direction. Or if the person is in panic already, there's a way of breathing that can have the effect of taking the person out of the hyperarousal back into their window of tolerance. So this is the simple version of it. You could, if you want to talk in ordinary casual language, because we don't want to just talk jargon at our clients. So this is like panicky overwhelm, the hyperarousal. This is re-traumatizing, the flashbacks, that kind of thing, which is where the person will typically say, this is too much. Yeah, I can't stand this. This is too much. I'm feeling too much. And then the comfort zone is across a spectrum where in the middle the person feels quite safe and there's a balanced equilibrium. But this end is more comfortably numb towards dissociation, and this end is more towards vital engagement with life. So what does that mean for the breathing? So if you think about the window of tolerance, depending on the state that your client is in to begin with, you could distinguish, this is really just broad brushstroke starting point, you could distinguish four breathing principles. There's not even techniques. There's different kinds of techniques for these different things. But you could establish 4 categories of what you're trying to do depending on the client's starting point. If the person is hyper aroused and like in trauma, in a panic, yeah, then maybe you want to instruct them. You want to do a breathing instruction that helps them calm and soothe, that takes them out of the panic into their comfort zone and into the window of tolerance. So if you remember, yeah, go on. Yeah.
Can you please explain the differentiation between hypo and hyper arousal?
Hyper is like a volcano of sympathetic fight flight. Okay. Like when we've done trauma workshops before in Therapy Works, I've given the simple image for post-traumatic stress. The simple image is there's a volcano of feelings, fear, terror, rage, a volcano that is blocked from exploding by an ice cap of frozenness and numbness and dissociation. So the ice cap, the blue hypoarousal, is meant to protect the person from having the volcano explode.
Okay.
But because the ice cap blocks aliveness altogether, there can never be any resolution of the trauma, because basically the person is frozen and terrified and they're shrinking from life in a dissociated state at the extreme. And if they don't get any help within that state, they're constantly frightened of the trauma being re-experienced, and they're terrified, of course, of the volcano exploding. So our task is to allow some of the traumatic volcano in a manageable way. Yeah? This is what they call titration. Okay, so hypoarousal is the parts of the system that are frozen in numbness or dissociated, cold. Yeah, like there's a kind of fear that where the person says, "I feel cold, I feel frozen." That's part of the hypoarousal. Hyperarousal is when they feel too much. When they feel panicky, their heart is racing, there's hyperventilation, they feel tingling, shaking, they feel their body is going to overwhelm, the volcano is going to blow. Yeah?
Okay.
So depending on your client's starting point in the session when they come to you, they may be in a hyper-aroused, panicky state. And then I'm trying to now distinguish different principles of breathing depending on the client's state.
Okay.
So,
thank you so much.
When the person feels out of control, and they could feel out of control also in frozenness, they could feel out of control in the volcano, or they could feel out of control in the frozenness, they feel helpless. And they're waiting for you to instruct them. You cannot just be, when they're in that state, when they feel helpless and out of control, you cannot just be a receptive, passive listener of a therapist, because they want you to do something. They want to be instructed. They want you to take over. They want you to take action. They want you to do something because they feel unable to, they feel paralyzed and helpless. So this is a different relational stance. And in these kinds of moments, probably an instruction, the therapist giving instructions, being directive, often is experienced as helpful. Many times we say therapists in therapy shouldn't be directive. You should be more receptive and following the client's process. But when the client is in a re-traumatized or traumatized state, they are helplessly waiting for you to be directive and to give them instruction. That is very, yeah, go on.
Give an example of a response that you could give a client in a hyper mode.
Well, it's a little bit like what I did with Amber. So do you remember when Amber first started, she thought she was asking a question, but then we just had a little mini session. And there was a little bit of, she was talking about panic and panic when presenting. And when I was trying to demonstrate talking her, I said, you want to be calm and cool in front of the audience. My voice changes. Do you notice that? My voice becomes a bit hypnotic and my voice becomes a bit more slow. And to some extent, you could think like you're talking also. It's not always true exactly, but sometimes it's true that it's as if you're talking to a child. Imagine that your child is in bed at night and they're having a night terror and they're afraid that there are monsters under the bed or something. How do you talk to them? It's not just the words you speak, it's to do with your whole presence and the speed and the calmness and how you talk in very simple terms. So there is, when a person feels regressed and helpless and they feel overwhelmed by, out of control, overwhelmed by trauma, in a way they regress to a kind of helpless child state, a little bit like a child having a night terror. So you want to have the kind of presence that says, it's fine, hold my hand, okay, now, you want to talk like that. So there is a kind of, some people might say there's a kind of hypnotic quality to how you do that because you're trying to change their state. This is very different from the bulk of therapy where you do not want to impose anything, you do not want to direct them, you do not want to change their state because you want to accept their state, you want to meet them where they are. So this is what people usually oversimplify and don't quite get their head around, that depending on the client's state, very different kinds of therapy are required. Sometimes a very kind of doctor-like therapy is required, and sometimes a very receptive person-centered therapy is required. It depends on the client's state and their character habit. So the same thing applies to breathing. As we said earlier repeatedly, the starting point is the client's habitual breathing pattern and its protective function. And then the question is, how do you interact with that and how do you relate to that? Okay.
Michael, I wanted to ask, because this is exactly the question that we discussed in our group, that we cannot be directive and we can't just straight away tell the client that, okay, I would like you to do some breathing, calm down, or giving them like a kind of a indirective kind of an instruction that some people, feel better or more calm when they breathe, or I would like you to invite you to do some breathing exercises. So all these kind of terms, and directive like kind of wordings, are they appropriate? Because I don't remember that you went about doing it like that. You did not suggest straight away to her that I would want you to breathe, slowly or something, like when you were working with, the girl who was having a problem.
Well, yeah, I understand. So do you remember if you remember what we ended up with? We ended up with the idea that there were two of her. There was one that was floating and calm, capable of floating and calm, and the other one was terrified and panicky in front of the audience. And we said that these two parts of Amber need different kinds of therapy, but most of the time they are mixed. See, it would be very nice if human beings came packaged in one particular state or the other, but most of the time it's joyously confusing and compromised and conflicted. It's a mixture. This is why general instructions are bound to go wrong at least half the time. Any kind of general therapeutic instructions, including breathing instructions, are likely to be correct or appropriate only for half of the client. So the basic principle is that we need to understand the client's conflict before we do some kind of single-minded instruction or technique. we need to understand that there are different parts of the client that need different things and want different things. And they have different parts of the body where they are alive. The floating amber is connected, is anchored in certain parts of her body mind, and the panicky amber is anchored in other parts of her body mind. So you want to understand that there is this mixture in front of you, and then once you accept that, then it gets a little bit more detailed and complicated, because then you can ask the question. But you see, most breathing techniques do not accept that they have a conflict in front of them, or that they have two people in front of them. You could say one hyper-aroused and one hypo-aroused, and somebody sort of there in the mix, in the middle. So the instructions I can suggest, they depend upon you having first accepted that you're working with a conflict, that I'm not going to teach you some kind of blind breathing technique that you're going to apply across the board, or not even with one client, because the client has different aspects and different parts. And so we all need to, if we all can get into the ballpark first, that we accept that the client is a mixture, a conflicted, compromised mixture, and their breathing cycle is also conflicted. There are certain parts of the breathing cycle that can be flowing, and there can be other parts that are interrupted in the cycle. So if we could all get onto the same page and say, okay, we understand that there is no categorical, one-dimensional, singular instruction that's going to work for this person, because there are different parts of them. Once we get all onto the same page with that, then we can think more precisely. Then we can think about, well, there may be different parts, but one of them is more in the foreground and one is more in the background. So when I was talking to Amber and she mentioned, I want to sort out my panic when presenting, and then she herself volunteered the memory of the floating. And then I said, look, you just reinvented a neuro-linguistic programming technique, because you already imply that you want to bring the floating state, the resource of the floating state, into the presentation. So then when she had volunteered that, in that moment, for a brief moment, the floating state was a bit more in the foreground. So you could say that I noticed that there were both of them, but I then in more detail appreciated that the floating one was in the foreground and was in a way coming towards me, reaching out to me. And then I can intervene in a way that connects with the one that's in the foreground. Does that answer the question?
Yes, but that brings me to another thing which happened actually with me while Amber was doing it. I also started visualizing, because I have the same issue. I have a lot of social anxiety and public speaking anxiety. So I started, when you said that, if she could visualize and incorporate imagery and kind of go into that space where she's very calm and composed. So I started visualizing, and the vision that came to me was by me being hugged by my mother. So that gives me a lot of comfort. But then my mother passed away with cancer, and there's a lot of trauma associated with that too. So I started conflicting that, okay, that is my safe space. At the same time, that is my trauma space.
Yes.
So how do I go, if my client, I kind of, utilize this kind of thing, and if that is the case, that will kind of backfire also. I mean, it's very complicated. I don't know. I'm not.
I agree.
But everything is possible, and anything is possible, just like it happened to me right now.
Yes. So most of the time, and some of you have been with me through this, when we were doing workshops, most clients, let's say naive clients off the street, they would like happiness and perfection without any suffering. And they come to you, they pay you in order to fulfill that impossible expectation or demand. Yeah? Please let me pay you $50, and then at the end of it, I'll have happiness without suffering. I just want perfection. And please, I want to be able to pay you so you make perfection happen. So that is a very one-sided, one-dimensional idea that people have of themselves and what they want. This is just the ego dreaming up in wishful thinking of perfection. The real thing that people deep down want, but they're not always able to ask for it, is not that they want perfection, they want wholeness. Wholeness includes suffering and the shadow. So I'm assuming that what people are unable to ask for in that moment is to be fully alive in wholeness. So when they make one-dimensional requests and demands for perfection, I'm taking that as part of their problem. I'm not taking that as, oh, this is what they're asking me to provide. I'm taking that as part of their problem. I'm noticing that their ego is in the foreground and their ego is wanting perfection, and their ego is, in the moment where they're asking for perfection, they're actually destroying the very wholeness that deep down they want. Am I making any sense?
Yes, it's a beautiful
Okay.
process, yeah.
So
I had a question. Can I go ahead?
yeah.
So it's a follow-up question to what we were just talking about. So you were talking how we should look at the window of the client when he or she
Yes.
comes in. So basically, from a client's perspective, so it has happened a lot of times in therapy that I would be, processing intense feelings, and I would be, so to call, in the hyper-arousal state, and
Yes.
and I would be crying intensely. So my therapist would ask me to calm down and give some breathing instructions. So I would calm down in that moment, and that would help me calm down. But like I sort of felt that in that moment it intervenes not in a positive way with the therapeutic process itself. Like for example, if I am processing some harsh trauma and I'm stunted in the middle of it. So what happened was, after the sessions, I would feel so drained, and because I was depressed at that time, so those sessions were very hard to deal with afterwards. Like they put me in a very bad state afterwards, sort of like a physical draining, like not be so much drained that I could not like even get out of the bed. So what would you say about that? The breathing techniques or the breathing instructions, or even like following the windows instructions that you give, if they start interacting with the therapeutic process itself?
Well, there's no shortcut. Huh? If you are re-experiencing trauma, that is exhausting. In the example of the tiger chasing the antelope is going to be, when she has escaped, she's going to stand in some kind of clearing and she's going to shake. And for a while, she's going to be dysfunctional and she's going to be exhausted. If you want actual trauma recovery, you can't expect yourself to be functional all the time. You need that space that dysfunctional space for recovery. Your body is exhausted, your body has exerted itself, and you need time for recovery. So there's no shortcut through that. The other thing to say is that, you see, when people use breathing exercises and when they talk about regulating the client state, what that has degenerated into is that 95% of the time, people only talk about down-regulating. They talk about down-regulating the hyper-aroused state. That was never really, from the beginning, the idea. The idea of regulation is that you take into account the possibility of up-regulating as well as down-regulating. You, as a therapist, you want to be open to both. Now, what does that mean if you're in front of your therapist when you're crying? You're crying deeply and you feel out of control. As your therapist, I want to be able to have in mind the question, what wants to happen to the crying in terms of calming down, but what also I want to ask also, what might want to happen in terms of intensifying the crying? You see, most people, when they cry in a compromise. They cry in a compromised way. They cry, maybe the tears flow silently, or, So even with crying, when you already think you're outside of your window of tolerance, as a therapist, I want to be wondering how deeply, how fully alive are you in the crying? And is your crying compromised? And if I think it's compromised, like with Amber's neck, if it's compromised, immediately you want to have two ideas. You want to have the idea of calming down and down regulating, but you also want to have the idea of intensifying and up-regulating. You want to be able to think about how could this crying be even deeper. And typically, in order for people to really resolve trauma, you need to have an experience of an uncompromised experience that really allows your body to be like the antelope. Most human beings interfere with the recovery process because they experience the feeling, they experience some of the trauma symptoms, they experience the trauma, but in a compromised way. So then the body doesn't ever fully complete the cycle, and so you don't fully recover. So the thing you want to be able to think as a therapist is not just how do I calm the person down, but also how do I help them to have the trauma experience and the upset or whatever the feeling is, the terror, the rage. How can I help them to have the experience more fully?
Okay. And so obviously there will be exhaustion after it.
Yes. Of course.
Okay.
Some exhaustion is part of it. What I'm saying is that some exhaustion happens because the experience is too compromised.
Okay.
Okay. So
thank you so much.
Let's do some experiential exercise because it's now time is soldiering on. So I want you to get into a pair. And I want you to pick A and B. One person is the person who is does the breathing, and the other person is the therapist. And I want you, the instruction for the client is to really take the time to breathe in a way that is enjoyable. That is, experiment with breathing in a way that makes you feel alive. And the instruction for the therapist is to notice the compromises. The client's mind has the instruction of breathing fully and deeply in a way that's enjoyable and alive. But you will notice that the client probably has a compromised breathing pattern where whatever instructions they give themselves, the compromised habit is also present. And as a therapist, I want you to experiment with noticing what you perceive to be manifestations of the compromise. Am I making any sense? So,
before you begin the exercise, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, a question, maybe I've missed something from what you've said, but is it possible to condition yourself or for someone to be conditioned to associate specific feelings with specific styles of breathing?
I didn't catch the last thing. To associate?
To associate specific feelings with specific styles of breathing.
That was from your chart, Michael.
Yeah.
I think it was your last slide.
Yeah. Well, the thought you want to have is that breathing isn't just anything that people do. They will say, I'm trying to achieve, let's say, floating. I'm trying to achieve calm. I'm trying to achieve joy. What they don't pay attention to is what they're avoiding, that they have a habit of avoidance. And the breathing pattern is the same thing applies. People's breathing is habitually avoiding things. So when you're asking about, are certain ways of breathing associated with particular states,
No. I mean, my main question was, is it possible for someone to be conditioned to associate certain feelings with certain styles of breathing?
It's not as specific as that, but for example, Amber, if she wants to condition herself. Yeah? That's in a way her request. She wants to condition herself to have a particular kind of state and a particular kind of breathing when she gives the presentation. So yes, I think the idea that she reinvented of trying to access the floating state when she's giving the presentation is some form of self-conditioning. She wants to be conditioned. She wants to have that kind of associative link made that when she gives the presentation, she can still access the floating. Yes. But of course, a lot of the time, people have these ideas of how they want to, in a way, manipulate themselves, condition themselves into a perfect state without paying attention to what they're avoiding. But for wholeness, as I was just saying, if you want wholeness, then all of these manipulative conditioning exercises are a bit dubious. Okay. All right.
Yeah, Michael, I want to ask you something about breathing fully. When you say that, what does that actually mean? Like, how can you understand that when you're doing it yourself?
You can't.
Does that mean you're calm? You're completely calm?
No, because you don't want to be completely calm. You want to be fully alive also. Because, like in that window of tolerance, the left edge is, I call, comfortably numb. Most people, when they talk about calm, they actually, there's a flavor of being comfortably numb. So it's very difficult to do by yourself because it's very difficult inside yourself to catch up with your avoidances. You have a breathing habit that is a compromise, that is full of avoidances which you don't even know, which you don't even remember. Your breathing is partly designed to avoid trauma or pain or suffering. And so if you try to do that, catch up with that inside yourself, is very difficult. So generally speaking, if we want to catch up with our unconscious avoidances, we do depend on other people helping us, relating to us, because it needs another person to notice your avoidances. It's very difficult to notice all your avoidances yourself with your own mind.
But you can notice some of your own avoidances.
Of course. Over time, they become more apparent. Yes, of course. You can do all kinds of experiments to flush out your avoidances, to become aware of them. Yes, of course. It is possible, but there are limitations to try and do it all yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's get into pairs. So take A and B, and this just really takes 5 minutes. 5 minutes of breathing is actually quite a long time. So one person breathes in a way that you find enjoyable and energizing, let's say, vitalizing. And the other person notices, even via the screen, whatever compromises they perceive. Yeah. So we do that for a few minutes, and then I'll send a message or something, and then you spend a couple of minutes talking about it in the pair. Does that make sense?
Excuse me. Sorry.
Go on.
Are you going to put us in rooms again, or do we just WhatsApp call each other?
I'm not sure what's the best way, to be honest, in terms of the technological format of it. I could allocate, randomly, we could just allocate breakout rooms. But if you wanted to choose, I don't know how to do that in Zoom.
Room is better, I think. Please put us in the room.
Yes, okay. We just, because also
breakout room is more appropriate because we don't know many people.
Let's just make breakout rooms, and then they can work there in pairs.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. I think in terms of timing now, it would be complicated to really make the pairs, and it would take a long time. So I suggest that for now, we just use the breakout rooms and let yourself be randomly allocated into pairs. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Ali, can you do that? So we take 5 minutes for the breathing, and we take a few more minutes, just 2-3 minutes for sharing what happened.
Hello, Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll put the instructions into the chat also.
Okay, I'm just trying to ask you one thing, that what kind of breathing instructions you want us to give as therapists? Because we only know the floating so far.
No, the therapist in this exercise, the therapist doesn't give any intervention. The therapist is just watching.
Okay, thank you.
You just talk about it afterwards. Okay.
Sure.
Michael, sorry, how much time do we have for this one?
5 minutes breathing and 3 minutes sharing.
Ali needs to put us in the room.
Hello?
Ali, people are confused. Can you please clarify what you're doing with the breakout rooms?
Yes, Ali, we are waiting to be put in the breakout room. Please put us there.
I've made the rooms. Okay. Please see if you have got the request. Just accept the request and you will be in the room.
But with whom? How? Ali?
I didn't got any request, Ali.
Okay, who's this?
Nadia Fahim.
I didn't get a request either. I'm Aniza Zafar.
I don't have a request. This is Sanya Q Ali.
I didn't request from me also. Okay, just hold on, please, everyone.
Okay,
everyone, just please hold on.
Yeah, Ali. Ali,
I've made the rooms. All of them have got the request. All you have to do is just to join the room, and if you have not got the request, just let me know one by one.
Ali, I have not gotten it.
Faiza
Hamal.
I didn't get the request.
Yeah, I haven't received one either.
I didn't get it.
Isma name. I haven't received any.
Sophia, I didn't get one either, Ali.
So, Sadia here. I also haven't received a request.
I haven't.
Ali, nothing.
No, Sheila Qayyum, I haven't received it.
Neither have I.
Who have gotten the request, but most of you haven't.
I also haven't received a request.
I haven't received
it. Mostly haven't, Ali. I think
to Ali and Michael and see that we are putting two people together. It's going to take a few minutes. Just be a little patient, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I don't think I can do anything. So whilst you're waiting, I've had there's a few questions that have distracted.
Michael,
yeah?
You want me to put everyone just
into pairs?
Yeah, into pairs and in each room. Just a couple of them. Okay, then I'll have to make the rooms again. Just hold on.
So why can't we video call each other? Make pairs ourselves.
Not
if
possible,
this takes
Zabia,
time.
because there are too many participants. So I'm just closing
Okay.
all the rooms, and then
people and not everybody knows each other. So it's a little bit difficult to WhatsApp call.
That's right. I know.
Excuse me, listen to me, please. I've closed all the rooms, and then I'll make it again, and then I'll just assign 2 people for each room.
अली मुझे भी आप असाइन कर दो मुझे ग्रुप नहीं मिला अभी तक
I think, guys, you can have only, I was just Googling it, you can have only 50 breakout rooms. So maybe that's the problem. Ali, can you hear me?
Hina, this is the other room. Now, 1 second, please. Can I speak? 1 second, please listen. बात ना करें. Just listen. This is
Do this, beta, please.
Could you please keep quiet for a minute? Could you please close your mics and listen to me? This is a separate Zoom connection that is not like the ordinary 100 people Zoom. And I think this is the first time, so we are really running up with snags because of inexperience. Because till we had everybody here, we didn't know how to do it. It worked very nicely when we had people, 5 and 6 people to a thing. The breakout rooms worked very nicely. Now that it's pairs, Ali is struggling, and we're going to do our best to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But at the moment, your patients, do karke, let's see how many can get.
Actually, I'll be able to make.
Actually,
I'll be able to make 50 rooms, so there will be 4 to 5 participants in each room. So then they can make their pairs and they can work in pairs, however they want.
That works. Okay. Ali, put 4 people in each room.
There will be 4 to 5 people in each room.
Yeah. 4 are better.
In room 12 with 4 pairs, we have already started, Ali, with 2 each.
Yes.
So we can
4 or 6.
Everyone, please accept the request.
But
Okay, but I was in group 1. How can I go to group?
What about the people who are already done with the group?
Yeah, we are done.
I already had one person with me, so I'm done with the exercise.
Yes, me too. Why again I'm getting the group invite?
Again, receiving the invite.
In breakout room 12, we have already almost halfway. So can we go back?
Yeah, I lost my group. I was in room 1.
Yeah,
we have lost our groups. And I don't know how to go back.
I'm back.
Neither do I.
Can you see me? Komal, can you see me?
Yeah, I see you, Yasmin. I see you.
Can we continue instead of wasting time?
Okay. So what did you notice? Because I was breathing for like 3 minutes and what did you know?
Okay, Komal, I felt that in the beginning, you started, where are you, Komal? Yeah, you started with, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
You started with shallow breathing, and but you seemed very aware of it, very conscious of it, not very comfortable. That's what I thought. And you were constantly, with opened eyes, you were looking on your left side. And on your right side, I would say, from my side. And then, yeah.
Okay, some of the people have not accepted the request. So please accept the request and join the room.
We are already through with it.
We're already through.
Room 12, we are done. And we are discussing.
Ali, this is Tehmeena Shahid and I have not received any request. आप मुझे भेज सकते हैं?
Okay, Tehmeena, please wait.
जी.
Ali, I also haven't received any request.
Who's this?
This is Atia Umar.
Okay.
Yasmin, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, let's join the breakout room so that we can go. Maybe we will go back to room 12 again.
Ali, do that.
No.
Ali, we are already done, Ali.
Okay, so then you can wait here.
Okay, we will wait. We will wait.
Okay. ये हो गया थोड़ा कम टाइम में तो लेकिन अब लैस थोड़ी कर लेना we cannot
Ali, come on, can you get everybody back? Must be time.
Okay, Michael, I'm closing all the rooms.
So hi, Michael. Our
Yes.
Our room closed within a minute and a half, maybe, and then,
I know it's difficult
it got
with
disconnected. And it connect back. So we lost out on.
Yes, I
on our
understand.
time. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about that.
So there were. Sorry to interrupt you. There were a couple of. Whenever you start, if I could be, them, that would be great. Whenever you give.
Let's just negotiate a bit more time, because obviously we're coming to the end of time. I don't know how many of you feel able to go on a bit longer, but this would be very incomplete now to chop off. So I'm happy to go on for a bit longer.
Can I ask you something?
How many people are people okay with going on for longer? Let's say another 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that.
I don't mind.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Michael, I didn't understand the cycle which you were explaining. Somehow it was very the baby breath cycles completely. So I'm very lost on that one. And how to connect it with it. So if you could just spend 2 minutes on that little bit, if you can, if there's time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You understand the idea of the cycle, though? That all experience goes through cycle. Whenever you have an impulse, it's slowly, the idea of that model is that your experience goes through cycles that slowly form from within you. There's an impulse, and that when that impulse gets activated, it sort of ripples through your system and it grows. And in a way, you could imagine that impulse. In order for it to manifest, it needs energy. So the energy, it needs activation. So the part of the human system, body-mind system that prepares for action is the sympathetic system that activates arousal. That is the same thing as in-breath. Yeah? In-breath is like taking in oxygen, taking in air for action. It's preparing for action. You need energy for action. So you could say that the first part of the cycle and the emphasis on the in-breath is preparing for intensity and action. So that's more the sympathetic system. It gets you ready for action. It's not just fight and flight. It gets you ready for action. And so all of these aspects of the body-mind that contribute to the preparation for action, they need to be part of this in-breath half of any cycle. And then the impulse has a purpose. And in simple terms, you could say that this is not entirely correct, but generally speaking, you could say that the purpose of an impulse is some kind of contact with the world, contact with life, contact with other people. So some kind of contact and expression occurs. So all the preparation of the in-breath half of the cycle has some kind of purpose. And the purpose is some kind of contact or expression. And if that contact is satisfying, then the experience of that gets integrated, and then the parasympathetic system tends to be dominant, which is about relaxation. It's about more an internal thing. You take in what you have experienced. It's a kind of inward thing, the inward part of the cycle. So that's more to do with the out-breath and the letting go. So generally the association is that in-breath is like action and energizing, and out-breath is more like letting go and like a surrender. And that goes through all the levels of the body-mind. Does that answer the question? Humera? Okay. This was all very, yeah, go on.
Michael, I had a very interesting situation wherein I had a lady with a hijab and there was a man as well in our group. And therefore, I observe breathing through the hijab. And we can discuss that at a later point. So that's another thing that could come in, when you're trying to observe. So I just thought I'd share it.
The human being has an uncanny capacity, to perceive nonverbal cues, and to some extent, some nonverbal cues are obscured by the hijab. But there's many other channels of perception. And I think even if somebody was sitting in front of me completely covered up, I think I could still sense something especially in terms of this basic distinction between energizing and relaxation and the compromise. The task for the therapist was to notice the compromise. Yeah.
And that's what we did. So we had two observers and I was the therapist, but we were able to see through that. So that's another situation which, when it was the energies and the movements, etc., that all came in along with the breathing.
Yes, I agree. Yes, because the breathing really is a whole body-mind experience. It's a whole body-mind pattern, and all the internal aliveness of the body, the vegetative system, it all kind of plays a part in the overall experience of the breathing cycle. And the key question, the key thing to notice, the key principle to take away from this exercise is whether, as a therapist, you can perceive the habitual compromise in the other person. So this is what I said earlier on in the session. I said this is one of the fundamental starting points that most breathing techniques and breathing exercises ignore, is that the instruction is being given into a system that is always already compromised, is contested territory, and there are forces operating there's a tendency towards a more fuller breath, a more intense, more vital breath, but all kinds of compromises. And the key thing that I was hoping you would take away from the exercise is the noticing that we have the capacity to see the compromise in action in front of us. And that then will inform you really not only what is the client's current state, but also what habitual compromises does that current state exist within. So there is a particular characterological habit and a particular window of tolerance, and which you're perceiving as a fundamental background compromise, and then you're perceiving that the client is in a particular state within that spectrum, within that compromise. So that's the foundation for anything else that we do. So I'm interested in how many of you had some kind of intuition or perception of that compromised background state.
Michael, may I? Shazia? When we started, person in my group and myself, and we had agreed on who's going to be the client. So she, before starting, she told me how she tends to hold her breath. Okay. But that she has worked on it consciously, not to do so now in her everyday life. Okay. And then just as she started, she took a a heaved breath in. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then I could see that she was trying to breathe evenly, but from what I could see on the screen, it was coming as really short breaths as she tried to bring it down and calm it down. And that's all that we had time for.
So to me, what I'm taking from that is some kind of idea that the instructions that somebody gives themselves for the breathing feeds into the compromise and the conflict that's already there. Yeah? So whatever breathing instructions your client has previously been taught and has absorbed, in a way it complicates the picture. Like if she came in as she would, like let's say historically, with just shallow breath, your task would be easier, because you would see this is the habit, this is the pattern. You can feel the shallow or the holding of the breath to start with, and this would be the characterological habit. Now it's more complicated, because now the person that's actually sitting in front of you is already trying to counteract that. So they are at war with the habit, quite understandably, and they're giving themselves instructions. Now, a lot of these instructions are helpful, but a lot of these instructions that people give themselves are also unhelpful. So you're ending up with a very confused picture. So that's why it's so important that we as therapists have an independent perception about what the breathing pattern actually is to start with, rather than rushing in and exacerbating the somewhat blind, one-dimensional instructions that the client's mind is giving themselves.
So, Michael, I wanted to share my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, the lady who I was observing, so I was a therapist and she was the client.
Yeah.
So she did not even close her eyes, and her face was like a poker face. I was trying to look into her breathing, but it was as if there was nothing, absolutely still. So the chest was hardly moving. Her eyes, though, went a little droopy in between, and her head went down as if, and her shoulders also. But it was for a very fraction of a second, and then she's not, wasn't stiff, but she just like pulled herself back and
pulled herself. Let me understand. Pulled herself back from what, in your perception?
So in my perception, I saw her eyes drooping down, her head tilting down, her
like a drooping, you said.
Yes, her shoulders a little drooping down, and then I did not even feel, so I would assume that there would be a deep breath, and then you pull yourself back, but there wasn't a deep breath. So her head went back, her eyes went back up, her shoulders went back up. So I felt that this exercise was like a breathing exercise on part of the client, which would be so like enjoyable or lively, but that did not come across. And her response, her feedback afterwards was that I was feeling relaxed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so this is exactly the point of my suggestion of that exercise or that experiment, is that one person's window of tolerance can be very different from another person's window of tolerance, and that the window of tolerance exists in a compromised habit. So is it true when your client says, I felt calm and comfortable? Is that true? Well, probably it is true within her limited window of tolerance.
Yeah.
And of course, if we had a longer workshop where we are all clear about the basic principles, then we would now do a second exercise where we experiment. So because now if I'm you, identify with you, we have a problem. You have a person in front of you who says, given left to my own devices, this is what I find comfortable within my window of tolerance. And we need to validate that. We need to meet the client where they are, and that is their reality. But we are now having a problem because we are saying, yeah, but there's so many other potentials and possibilities for a different, deeper, wider, more intense, more alive kind of experience that the person is kind of deprived from, or they can't access. So then the question is, what are we now going to do with that? Because one thing we can do, which is what many breathwork practitioners do, they end up pathologizing the client. They end up saying, you think you're comfortable in your limited breathing there. You don't know what breathing is. This is a very shallow breathing and you haven't got a clue what good breathing is. Let me tell you how to do correct deep breathing. So that is the trap that many breathwork people fall into. Now, is that valid? Well, there is a kernel of validity because you and I are having the same problem. We're thinking, well, yeah, but this is comfortable, but it is limited. It is compromised. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we are now at liberty to march in there and share our perception, and because it can very easily become pathologizing and judgmental. So what are we going to do with that? So if we had more time, we would now go on to do another exercise where you try to give instructions. The first thing is you would check out, well, okay, this is how you breathe left to your own devices. Now, do you want me to give you some input? Do you want me to give you some feedback or suggestions for how to breathe differently? Because I think you might have a more satisfying experience if you breathe differently. And then you could try to give very specific instructions to her what to change, or how to adapt her breathing, and the instructions that she gives to herself, how to adapt her breathing in order to experiment. This is basically an experiment. So that would be a good exercise now. So if you did that just off the top of your head, what would be the main, let's say the top 2 or 3 suggestions that you would make to her? What would be your instruction, your suggestion? What would you say to her?
So the first thing that came to my mind was closing her eyes.
Okay, instead of keeping them open.
Yes.
Can you explain to the rest of us the logic of that idea? Why? What difference does it make to close the eyes?
So for me, it means closing the eyes it means that I'm in a safe place where I can actually close my eyes and not worry that something outside would happen, would harm me.
Okay, that's interesting. It's interesting because you see, I was imagining you might say, when I close my eyes, I get more connected with my sensations in my body. I wasn't expecting you to say, I feel safer. But it does sort of make sense, because for many people, horizontal looking at another person is somewhat anxiety provoking. Yeah? Because for many people, the presence of another becomes a kind of expectation or a judgment or a demand or a pressure. So for many people, I think it is true that if they close their eyes, they are somewhat kind of disconnecting from the outer pressure of the other person there, the presence of the other. So I think both is true. Both can be true. That if I close my eyes, I can feel my sensations more clearly, with more awareness, more distinctly. But maybe I'm also needing to disconnect from some kind of pressure from the presence of the other person. And that would be exactly, I don't know whether Safa is still there, but that would be exactly the kind of subtle manifestation of transference that would be part of almost everyday relating. This kind of pressure that I look at you, I check your eye contact, I make eye contact, I check eye contact, but somehow there's a feeling of, I have to get it right for you, I have to be appropriate, I have to be, there's a pressure to be, to be appropriate. And for many people, that would be part of the transference. It is not an obvious thing, or not a logically, God-given thing, that I should be experiencing you as pressure. I could be experiencing you as a really loving, benign presence that wants the best for me, like a mother that is delighted to look at her baby. Now, many people don't look at another person and expect that. Many people look at another person and they expect judgment, or shaming, or something, or pressure. So that would already be quite a deep transference that we're dealing with by experimenting with closing the eyes. Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, so one thing is you say, one thing is you might say to her, one of the first things is give yourself space to really feel the breathing by closing your eyes. Okay, that's the one instruction. I think that's a good idea. Okay, and what else would you say?
I think you've put it pretty well, the way you've said it. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go on.
I'll talk about myself. I was being the client, and as usual, I was just doing the breathing exercise, but I was pretending this. I didn't want to because I'm the one who is not comfortable in my own body. So I was pretending it. And it was hard, and it took some time, you know, and I was just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, and so yes, and of course, if you're not comfortable in your body, that is what you need to do in social situations, generally, not just in a therapy exercise. That is what you need to do. If you're not comfortable, you need to some extent, you need to perform and pretend. So if you were my client, I would obviously recognize that that is in a way necessary. But then, of course, part of the therapy would be how can you and I be together in a way where that pretense is less necessary. But of course, if you can drop a bit below the pretense, what we would get into fairly quickly is what you said is your starting point, which is that you're not comfortable in your body. You know, there's a conflict, some kind of conflict going on between your mind and your body, on who you want to be in your mind and who you feel you are in your body. So many people have this, that they feel they are a mind trapped in a body that they don't like.
I'd like to share my experience, if that's okay.
Yes.
Basically, I was the therapist and the other person was the client, and I just asked them, you know, go ahead and breathe in the way that you're comfortable. So she actually told me she's going to count this much and hold it for this much and then release it this much. So after she did it once or twice, I asked her how she felt, and she said it was hard to focus because she was focusing on the counting so much. So
yes,
I said,
exactly.
It would help that, you know, you didn't focus on the counting. And then she also felt like it was difficult. And she stated, like, you know, some reasons she felt like, you know, she'd been smoking too much or this or that. So she kind of felt like, oh, I'm not good at this because. So I said, how can we change it to make it more comfortable for you? So we kept on trying different things, and I kept on asking her,
okay, I'm interested. Okay, slow down.
Sorry.
Okay, I can hardly breathe. You're talking so fast. I want to be with you. Hang on and go slow. So in a way, you already did the second exercise that I will say.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to share, because every time, like once or twice she would breathe, then I would be looking at her. Like, I felt like you jerked in, like, you know, you're breathing in too fast. And so why don't you try to, like, you know, put your hand on your belly or your chest, whichever one is comfortable. And I kept on telling her whatever's comfortable for you. And so, you know, and then try it. So take it in slow, because she felt like, oh, it's hard for me. And I told her, instead of holding it, you really feel like you need to hold it. Maybe you can not hold it and try how that feels. So again, we tried different variations as we were going through it. And by the end, she found a place where she was comfortable, where she was holding her hand on her belly. And then she, you know, just did it according to what was comfortable, and she didn't hold it. And then she felt like, you know, that was the most relaxing. So I thought, you know, that was good that we got to a place where she was comfortable.
Amazing. Yes. So this is the basic principle. And one of the things that I really like about the way you did that is the atmosphere of experimentation. Because between some clients and therapists, the atmosphere that develops is very much the atmosphere of instruction. And clearly, when she started out, she was already giving herself instructions, you know, holding like this. You can just hear the yoga instruct the background. Yeah, can you hear?
Yeah.
Now breathe. Count to
in
4.
fact, first thing she did was ask me for instruction.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I'm not going to give you the instruction.
Exactly. So the chances for falling into that are pretty high. Now, of course, as you very quickly discovered, and this was exactly the point of the exercise, that the way the person has learned to breathe is compromised. When somebody puts so much effort or straining into the holding and the counting and the everything, then they are really emphasizing more the first half of the cycle, which is about control. They're not getting the benefit of the second half of the cycle, which is more about surrender. It's not just about calming and relaxing, because it can also be, there's the enlivening quality that we also want. But clearly you managed to create an atmosphere of experimentation where overall the in-breath and control part ended up being more balanced with the surrender and the relaxation part. Yeah. So that's important that we with some clients, not always, but with some clients, it's really important that we can facilitate this kind of atmosphere of experimentation.
Michael, can I ask you something? Can I just add something? So till before this workshop,
sorry, Michael.
Oh, somebody's speaking already. Hello?
Okay, go Humaira.
Okay, so yeah, I was saying before this workshop, I only thought of using the breath for calming purposes, Michael? For anxiety and stressful purposes. But now it seems it's a huge window into the client's world and the wound, and it's just not, my vision was very limited. I think it was just for the relaxing technique. But now it seems huge cues can be picked up from what the client is embodying and what he's going through in the here and now, or even like you said with the trauma. So it's a nice feeling actually to know that, wow, there was so much more to it. And especially the title now, working with the breath, is more appropriate to the kind of work that you've done, rather than, relax, calm and stress and anxiety. So it fits this part of the work more. So that's my understanding from all of it till now. So, it's I think a great thing. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Michael, can I please have a few moments if that's okay? Because I have to rush. So I was holding this question. I was intrigued by something that I read in the handouts that was sent to us. How does it work? Like the work that you just did with us, how does it work to help couples connect somatically? Because I was pointed out in the handouts, and from the way you explained it, seemed that we're dealing with a lot of, 1, internalized messages, 2, defenses, 3, characters, because there are 3 people in the room. So we're not just dealing with the sort of the horizontal.
Well, as I said, that just the way Humaira said, the tragic thing is that when to most people who bother to pay attention to the breath at all, we get this very one-dimensional, down-regulating, calming message, which really limits the full breadth of it. And one of the, as I mentioned earlier, one of the real downsides is that without it being really fully spelled out, there is some kind of assumption that the best we can hope for is that our minds learn how to control our breathing for the best benefit. Whereas, especially when you think about couples, what we're aiming for ultimately is not some kind of discipline or some kind of effort or some kind of training and instruction, because we want the thing to be spontaneous, both for the individual, but especially for couples. You want the love to flow spontaneously rather than as a result of some kind of, torturous, disciplined exercise that they go through. So for that, we really, in the way that Humaira was talking about, we need to expand the idea of breath work from this kind of instructional pursuit of the correct breathing, whether it's as an individual or in a couple. And we need to also pursue the idea of both of them returning to the kind of full pulsation, natural, spontaneous breathing that doesn't need thinking about. Because that would be the expression really of the love flowing between them without duty or effort or straining. So that's what we're ultimately going for. But of course, most breathwork gets stuck in this one-dimensional instructional universe. So as you say, if we're understanding that, like in most couple therapy, I guess people would talk about the different attachment styles. Now, when you see somebody's breathing, you can probably guess their attachment style just from seeing their breathing. Because a particular way of breathing creates a particular kind of relational atmosphere. And it creates a kind of, each breathing pattern creates an atmosphere of openness or closedness. So in terms of attachment style, which is one of the main things we would be thinking about between couples, like who is the anxiously attached one? And there would be a particular kind of breathing that goes with that. And who's the avoidant one? Often we've got that kind of polarity, the anxious and the avoidant one. So yes, I think that kind of perspective on breathing can be useful because non-verbally, pre-reflexively, the couple constantly alienate each other and miss each other through being stuck in their particular habits. And all that habit has many, many manifestations and body-mind levels of experience, but it also manifests on the breathing level, yes. So you could say that one of the ways in which couples stay stuck is in how they polarize, how their different breathing patterns are manifestations of their habitual position and how they stay stuck in these habitual positions, yes. I think I think it's a valid way of thinking about it. I think it's good.
Thank you.
Michael, I have a very quick question related to that. So when you say that pressure is something that, you know, it should come naturally and it should be more fluid, when is the time when you let go? Like how much should the breathing work be pushed for, not pushed for, but like how long should you try for? Because even towards the end of this workshop, I still get anxiety with the idea of breathing. So
yes. So I mean, look, like when we do this again, I think it would be a good idea to do it again. And if you're up for it, I'll do a demonstration with you. Even on it's not very conducive to do it via the screens, but I'm happy to do a demonstration if you're up for it. The thing that we haven't got to today, there's a fundamental crossroads or a kind of conflict dilemma that as a therapist we have, and that's what I was talking about just a few minutes ago when we were saying, look, we're having a conflict. When you see the client's compromised state, they say they are comfortable, but you somehow perceive that a lot of the potential of the full pulsation is not accessed or not used, or they don't get the benefit of that. Then I said, we're in a conflict. We have a dilemma. It's the therapist's dilemma. What do you now do with your perception that the client is stuck in a compromise that they're not even fully aware of, that they're just habituated to? So the crossroads in simple terms manifests, and it's part of your question. Do we now try to change your breathing pattern, or do we pay attention to your breathing pattern as it is? Most of the breathing work that's out there already always assumes that there is an instruction to be given to change the existing breathing pattern. But as we know from therapy, if you as a therapist go into therapy trying to change the client, you're falling foul of the first principle of counseling, which is to meet the client where they are. And at first, the client needs to have some kind of experience of being accepted for who they are. That also applies to the breathing pattern. So we want to be able to take a very spacious, curious, attentive interest in how the breathing pattern is when it's left to its own devices, when nobody is pushing anything or instructing anything. We want to have as a starting point, the capacity to accept the breathing pattern as it is and work with the breath as it is. Because, of course, most of the time, the person's breathing pattern happens quite automatically, semi-consciously. So something happens when we pay mindful attention to the breathing as it is without changing anything. And of course, when we do that, if you deepen everything that we've said today in theory, if you deepen that into an experience, what should become possible is that you can feel together with the client, you can gain awareness of how the breathing pattern, the way it is, if you're not changing it, you're just staying with awareness with how it is, it should become possible to notice the protective aspect of it. So whatever the compromise or the limitation is, it can come into awareness. It doesn't come into awareness if the person never pays attention to their breathing. But if you spend time with them thinking, okay, so now feel the breath as it comes in. Okay, where do you notice your in-breath? Okay, is it through the sensation in the nose? Is it through the coolness of the breath? Is it in the expansion of the chest? How do you actually experience your in-breath? And you pay attention to it. And what's the balance between the in-breath and the out-breath? And how long is the in-breath? And is there a gap between the in-breath and the out-breath? And how fast is it? And how slow is it? How gradual is it? How deep is it? Does it reach the diaphragm or not? Does it get stuck in the throat? I'm not changing anything. I'm just paying attention. And I'm getting both of us to pay attention. So to me, that is the first foundation of doing anything else, is that as a therapist, I have the capacity to take detailed, mindful interest in the breathing pattern as it is. And yes, what we will probably find is that the breathing pattern, we can find in experiential detail that the breathing pattern is compromised. Now, sometimes that I'm living a compromised life. Some people would say I'm living in a cage. My rib cage is a cage that is limited. As I feel my chest is breathing in a box, or I feel like I'm a knight who has a body inside a kind of armor, and my chest can't expand or it can't relax, because this rigid thing there is holding me up. So we haven't changed anything, but there can be a profoundly moving experience of just contacting who I am in this body and who I am in this breathing pattern, and to actually become more fully aware in detail of the compromise that I'm stuck in. That can be quite a moving experience, and we haven't even started doing anything with the breathing. So that's half, to me, that's half of breath work, is the capacity to pay attention to how it is. And then, of course, when you pay mindful attention, then sometimes the breath changes spontaneously. So there's a whole kind of process that can emerge just from paying attention. The other half of breath work is to think about experimenting with changing it. So then you start giving instruction, like Safa, quite spontaneously, even though it wasn't part of the exercise. She already did that. She already used her own perception of the client's compromised breathing pattern to make suggestions. And somehow sounds like they sort of made that work relationally. There was enough of an alliance, which isn't always the case at all, but somehow there was enough of an alliance for the client to experiment. And that basically then boils down to experimenting with doing things differently, deliberately. So that's a whole second part of breath work, that we're experimenting with breathing differently in order to create a different state. As I pointed out throughout the session in 2 or 3 situations, most people, when they give themselves breathing instructions, they're doing some kind of violence to themselves. They're forcing things. We need to recognize that danger. As soon as we experiment with doing things differently, people do violence to themselves. We don't want to blindly fall into that trap. We want to be aware that if we give instructions, we may say, this is just a suggestion, see what happens. But internally, it feeds into a system where the person is persecuting themselves or pushing themselves. And we want to be aware that we are falling into that pattern, or that we're exacerbating that pattern. having said all that, it is possible to use all the breathwork instructions, including rebirthing and holotropic breathing, the logic of which is that you push the breathing. You basically make the breathing deep and deep and deep, and you raise the energy. You turn up the volume and you turn up the volume and you turn up the volume, and you come to the edge of the window of tolerance. You keep breathing past the edge of the window of tolerance. You keep intensifying and charging up the system artificially. But it's fundamentally, it's an experiment where you take yourself beyond the edge of the window of tolerance. And the person says, I'm going dizzy. You say, keep breathing. The person says, oh, I'm going to go unconscious. I'm going to faint. You keep breathing. Oh, I've got tingling in my body and my hands are going like this. You say, keep breathing. That is a possibility. But that becomes a creative, productive, therapeutic possibility only if you take care of all the dangers that we've talked about today. You want to be aware of all those dangers of how you're exacerbating the internal war and the internal persecution, because any traditional breathwork instruction, especially when it's more provocative or cathartic, easily feeds and re-traumatizes the client. So if you are fully aware of those dangers, then you can suggest these kinds of experiments, but you keep tracking the danger. Am I making any sense?
Yes, definitely. Michael, so I just wanted to share that I've had an extensive session with hypnosis, and they would ask you to go into trance, and I always faked it. Like 100 hours, I faked it because I just didn't want to go into breathing.
That's an expensive exercise. 100 hours of faking.
Yes. So yeah, I'm just like beating myself right now, but this was an aha moment for me. So thank you so much for today.
Well, this is similar to what other people have said. You know, like what the person who talked about having had the CBT therapist who 10 years ago kind of made her breathe in a certain way. So yes, no, the deep point is that first there is a human encounter, and first we want to, create a relational container. And then within that relational container, we can experiment. But first you need to arrive. You, the person underneath the pretense, needs to arrive. So that's not going to be helped by pushing you more. Okay. Thank you.
Michael,
all right.
I would like
wondering if you could
like to say something. Take me, Simon. I just like to say that there seems to be hunger for more, and I'll have a chat with Michael and then get back to you. There might be a need for a sequel with more demonstrations.
Yes, I agree.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to ask Michael for time. I think it was masterful. It covered almost everything except the demos.
Yes,
and
I agree.
The first part was provided, but the second part about how to be creative and that without using force or forced catharsis or anything else is something that we need a sequel for, perhaps another 4 hours, 4.5 hours, Michael.
I agree.
So perhaps, Michael, you and I can have a chat and then bring it back again.
I agree.
And it was very, very heartening to see Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, 245 students.
Amazing.
And it's absolutely, my heart is just there, it's wonderful. And you make it, it's all of you who make this. You create, and the quality of the discourse, the quality of the questions, and it's beautiful, absolutely. So thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tahir. That was actually exactly what I was going to say, that we need some demonstrations. So I want to be volunteering for as a client, if you could do that with me.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, say thank you to meet my expectations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, and everyone. Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Tahir, for arranging this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Tahir, you forget Multan.
Thank you, Tahir and Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. I'm going to go. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.